The early morning sun was showing, but the forest was in a mild fog of late fall as two men in crimson armor jogged through the woods. One was scouting left and the other right as they progressed in harmony. Flavius on the right asked, "You didn't know he could heal, did you?" Konstantin did not say anything for a mile as they raced toward the site where the wyvern had killed Master Mage Sebastian. Slightly out of breath, he finally responded to Flavius' question. "No, I did not know he could heal himself." There was silence between them for a time as Konstantin was trying to remember the battle at the aqueduct and replaying Eric's actions in his mind while maintaining his alertness. "Someone told me Tsinga, but he is awfully pale and tall for being from that southern kingdom." Konstantin had them halt with a hand motion and take cover as a giant elk grazing appeared ahead. It raised its massive rack to study the two men. Elks were dangerous this time of year, as they were rutting and fiercely defending their territory. They moved to the right in unison to avoid the beast. "He is from Tsingasam backwater village. Appearances do not mean much. There are always outliers," Konstantin said, defending Eric. When the two men paused to refill their canteens, Konstantin had a question for Flavius. "Why did you want to come with me so badly? Do you owe Sebastian's family something?" Flavius coughed on the water he was drinking. "No." He appeared to look over his shoulder like he might be heard. "I am glad he is dead, and seeing the body myself will quell some bad dreams. He had no family besides his brother, at least none I am aware of. I think a few illegitimate children are on his estate, but all his property will revert to Duke Okavtian, as it is in his province." Konstantin paused as he processed the information. "I did not know that was where his estate was located. I heard he had quite the menagerie of creatures." Flavius was removing his boots to check his feet. Durandus regularly visited his brother. He raised the drakes for the Emperor's Dragon Legion. Fire, ice, and smoke drakes mostly. "Smoke drakes?" Konstantin questioned the unfamiliar creature. "Smaller black drakes that are too small to ride," Flavius informed him. "They have shiny dark gray-black scales with red glowing eyes. They breathe a dark, fiery cloud of black smoke. Malicious creatures that suffocate their prey to kill them. Sebastian only had a pair of them but used them to hunt, relishing in the drake's manner of killing. I heard that Master Mage Sebastian was malicious," Konstantin said. Flavius grunted in affirmation. "He has a pack of dire wolves that he hunts with as well. Mage Durandus joined him once when we hunted down a carriage with a baron and his family that betrayed the Emperor. I tell the truth when I say Sebastian was smiling as his pets tore apart the man and his family. He took pleasure in their cries of pain." No more words were spoken as they soon continued their run. It was just before sunset when they arrived in familiar terrain. Konstantin had them pause. The mage and his companion dropped their packs here when they ran. "They should be around here somewhere." The two men circled the area and approached the ravine. "Did Eric take the packs?" Flavius asked. "No, maybe some goblins found them, but I do not see any tracks. Let us check down in the ravine. The summoner's companion was killed by Sebastian's drake down there," Konstantin decided. There was still enough light of the day to see as the two experienced men searched the area. The prints of the large drake were easily identified. Dried blood on this rock. Eric said the drake bit and tossed the smaller elf into the rocks. It was a female, probably a ranger with some fire magic. His hand ran unconsciously up to face. Curious there is no body or signs of it being eaten or dragged away by scavengers. Maybe the elf had a healing potion. Eric probably forgot to confirm the elf was dead, Flavius commented. I was thinking the same thing. Eric still needs training, Konstantin said. He was carefully moving dried leaves aside to look at prints underneath. The drake took to the air, and only Eric left the ravine. But if the elf were a ranger, she would have concealed her tracks, he theorized. They had spent too much time investigating the ravine, and Konstantin decided they would camp the ravine tonight. They split their time on the watch, and were up at the first hint of sun, to go to the site where the wyvern and drake had battled. The wyvern lay at the edge of the pine forest, as Eric has described. The smell of death hung lightly in the air, and got stronger the closer they stepped cautiously closer. Both men were apprehensive about approaching the corpse of the gargantuan creature. They circled from a distance, and Flavius commented, I don't see any wounds on the creature. Eric said he used poison to kill it. Oblivion pills, Konstantin grunted out. Oblivion pills? 4 or 5 can kill a man, but a wyvern, Flavius said skeptically. He said he used 100, Konstantin reminded him, but his voice also sounded uncertain. He was having trouble seeing the wyvern, pausing over Eric to gloat while the summoner controlled the creature. They both found where Eric had lay after getting rammed by the wyvern, his dried blood evident in the earth and grass. Neither spoke as they read the terrain independently. Konstantin finally said, "Let's go and check the drake and see if the collector is there. Should be on the other side of that felled tree." When they reached the tree, the dead elf summoner had large maggots crawling all over his body. "Eric killed the summoner?" Flavius asked apprehensively, kneeling to inspect the body. "He did not hesitate, if that is what you are insinuating. I disabled him with an arrow, and Eric killed him before he could heal himself." Konstantin noted Eric's prints around the site, and a Legionnaire canteen. He picked up the empty Legion canteen and sniffed the contents, his face growing wide in surprise. Flavius looked up at his shock. Konstantin smiled, shaking his head, handing him the canteen. "Alcohol. Probably rum. I guess Eric had it in his dimensional space for a special occasion. He said it took him half a day to heal himself. He probably needed it to kill the pain," Konstantin guessed. Flavius searched the elf and handed some folded papers to Konstantin. Neither could read Elvish, so Konstantin just secured them. Konstantin muttered to himself about Eric's failure to find the documents. They both walked to the drake. The throat had been ripped out, and the body was chewed on in many places. Coyotes, wolves, or another scavenger. Flavius noted the corpse had been scavenged. "They are probably watching us as they are not done with it. They chose to scavenge this one rather than the wyvern, as the scales were probably too difficult to get through," Konstantin thought. "Maybe the poison Eric used scared them off the wyvern carcass as well." Flavius nodded in understanding. They started to work the drake over to get the saddlebags underneath. As they worked, Flavius commented, "I heard the poison barb on the wyvern tail is a most deadly poison, and they are immune to it. Do you really think even 100 oblivion pills could kill a beast that size?" Konstantin grunted as he finally got the large saddlebag free. "I don't know. Eric doesn't strike me as the type of person who thinks things through but has Fortuna sitting on his shoulder, even when he is taking a shit." Flavius smirked slightly, but erased the expression just as quickly as it appeared. Konstantin was already digging through the pack and pulling out the collector. He had a big smile on his face, and it looked undamaged. Flavius took the pack and emptied the remaining items, going through the contents: camping supplies, 2 spellbooks wrapped in oiled hide, and some coins. "What should we do with these?" He indicated everything on the ground. Konstantin was packing the collector, and looked over. "Castile would have us split the coins, but still, we will give them to her first. She will probably want the magic books. Any essences?" Flavius searched the pouch with the coins again. "No, I guess he consumed them as he got them. I know he rarely rewarded his legionaries with essences. I saw him give a few essences to this beast before, though." He kicked the mutilated fire drake. "His collector is not very efficient, rarely yielding an essence from smaller creatures. I remember the 2 mage brothers arguing about it all the time when they were together. Sebastian was always envious of Durandus' dungeon collector, one of the best in the Empire. Strange how it disappeared." Flavius glanced sideways, judging Konstantin's reaction. "But he had none." "Well, this is better than having no collector. We still need to retrieve the body." Both men looked over at the wyvern carcass. When they got closer, Flavius walked to the head and inspected it. "Looks like a lot of blood dried and pooled here, maybe from the mouth or nostrils. Can obviation pills do that? Lots of poisons can destroy organs and cause bleeding," said offhandedly. "I think I will ask an alchemist if oblivion pills can cause something like this," Flavius said contemplatively. He was studying Konstantin for a reaction, but once again Konstantin did not seem concerned. Konstantin had his enchanted blade out and was cutting into the throat of the dead wyvern. Grunting, he noted, "Pity we did not have more men here to harvest this creature. It might have solved the Duchess' coin problems." "Unlikely. This is the Emperor's land. She couldn't claim it," Flavius said. Konstantin glanced at him sidelong. "How many times has Sebastian not reported the facts about harvests and essences?" Flavius huffed a short laugh and shrugged. Point taken. Mage commanders have always had a lot of leeway in the Empire. Some, not all, Konstantin said tersely. Konstantin worked his blade from the chest to the abdomen. Working the blade between scales and cutting the hide was difficult work. He then had to fight through muscles and fascia to get to the organs. As Konstantin worked, Flavius continued to explore around the creature. He saw movement on the edge of the woods and prepared his bow. Konstantin, a few wolves are watching us. Don't think they will bother us. A few minutes later, the wolves were gone. I know wyvern hide is prized for leather bindings on books and cloaks. Should we take some? You can if you want to spend the time, Flavius. Go ahead. I am already not looking forward to carrying back Sebastian's body as it is, Konstantin grumbled as he was arm-deep in the abdominal cavity. The cold liver came out first, blood still flowing as it had not coagulated without access to air. This turned Konstantin's arms, armor, and clothes red as he had to clear the massive liver away to reach the bloated stomach. Flavius did not volunteer to help as he was watching the tree line, and was still trying to figure out exactly what had happened here that allowed Eric to escape. Konstantin reached the stomach and cut into the rubbery lining, and he dodged as a squirt of stomach bile was expelled from his incision. He made more holes to drain the yellow bile and partially digested contents. The air smelled putrid as he held in his gag reflex. He avoided touching the bile and finally cut a long line from the top to the bottom. A small wave of compressed bones and flesh spewed out onto the ground, emptying the stomach as the lower abdominal cavity relaxed in a swoosh and hiss. The acidic air made Konstantin's eyes water as he worked. Flavius walked around to look at the mess. There was more than one body in the mess. That one with the dark blue robes is Sebastian. He really is dead. Would never have believed it if I had not seen it with my own eyes. The two men took to extracting the body from the mess. 2 children, a man, and half a horse, were in partial phases of digestion, mixed in the ball. Most of Sebastian's flesh and clothes sloughed off as they laid out the body. Konstantin noted. The wyvern was attacking a village before it flew here. Guess these were some of the victims. Should we take the artificed items? Flavius asked, indicating Sebastian's body. He had 2 bright gold rings, one on each hand, and a thick silver necklace. These all look like dungeon artifacts. They both knew if that was true, they would be worth hundreds of gold each, if not more. We will pack them for Castile. If they are registered with the Collegium Scholarium, they may come looking for them, Konstantin said, while removing the 3 pieces. What does that mean? Flavius asked, confused. Some powerful artifacts are documented with the Emperor's College. If you have no descendants or family, they become the property of the Emperor, Konstantin informed Flavius. Part of the job of the hounds is to track down these artifacts for the good of the Empire. Konstantin also knew sometimes the Empire made sure there were no descendants to pass an artifact to, either through misfortune or the courts not recognizing them as a relation to the artifact's previous owner. He cleaned off each ring and the necklace with water from his canteen and placed them in his pack. The last thing they had to do was prepare the body of Sebastian for transport. We should have brought the Goliath to carry the body back, Flavius said, not envying the task of carrying the dissolving corpse. Can I borrow your sword? I want a souvenir from the wyvern jester tooth. Konstantin looked at his blade. He had just gotten it back and did not want to loan it to Flavius, but they had worked well together so far. He had also spoken more words today than in the entire past week. He handed the runic weapon to Flavius. Flavius turned to work on the jaw. I wanted to let you know, Konstantin, that Sebastian sent me to see if Eric had his brother's collector. Konstantin was immediately on guard by the statement, but didn't show it. He stepped back half a step, pretending to work on preparing for the return. And, he asked, unconcerned. Doesn't matter now. The bastard is dead. But I think Eric has it, Flavius said as he was cutting into the gums. He is smart enough to know when not to use it, but it is the only thing that makes sense. Nothing in the swamp would have taken it. They searched his space when you were all questioned at the mage tribunal concerning Durandu's death, Konstantin said cautiously. Yes, but Eric was not with us the entire time. When we got back to the city, he went and took a bath, Flavius said, causing Konstantin to chuckle at Eric's love of being clean. Flavius pressed. So, He could have stashed it somewhere before and retrieved it after the tribunal. "Does it matter if he has it now?" Konstantin asked seriously, but was considering a lot of things now. But Konstantin already knew the collector was one of the artifacts that the College of Scholars would want back with both mage brothers dead. It was a collector made by a dungeon, much better than one's artificed by human hands, one that would have to be returned to the Emperor if no other family members claimed it. Flavius shrugged. "No, I guess not." He got both hands on a large tooth and started wiggling it free with all his body weight. The tooth was 10 inches long, giving him leverage. Blood flowed from the mouth as he worked. It finally popped and started to move. It still took 20 minutes and the help of the runic weapon to free the tooth. Flavius returned the runic blade, and Konstantin relaxed his guard. It had been in the back of his mind that Flavius might use it on him. Sweaty and tired from the effort, Flavius sat on the ground inspecting his prize. "I will send this to my daughter and tell her that her father slew a dragon," he said, smiling. Konstantin nodded, but taking the credit for someone else's kill was something he would never do. The pair were soon headed back. Each of them had half of Sebastian's body on their backs, wrapped in an oiled tarp. When the body reached the capital, Konstantin knew that the Emperor would call on a necromancer to talk to the deceased Master Mage to confirm how he died. It should help High Mage Zaina if there were any doubt she played a role in his death. As they jogged, Flavius had pieced several things together. The wyvern had lunged at Legionnaire Eric and just died. It had crashed into him and tossed him a good distance after colliding with him. No poison killed instantly like that. That left only magic. He doubted Eric was a powerful mage in disguise. If he were a powerful mage, joining the Legion of the Lion wouldn't make any sense. That meant he must have a powerful artifact on him that killed the wyvern. With Sebastian dead, he had no one to relay his assumption to. He looked at Konstantin, who ran a few steps ahead to the left. Konstantin worked for a Praetorian guard. Maybe he could use this information to get in the graces of his own Praetorian master. As the company registered the disbelief of my presence, they came by to slap me on the back knot, gently, and congratulate me once again for a miraculous survival. I think the slaps were to make sure I was actually here and not an illusion. With the welcome done, I started eating breakfast in earnest. I was pretty sure Firth started whispering a new nickname for me around the table, the Revenant. He thought it was funny, but I did not. Konstantin had called me that before he almost attacked me. Brutus informed me that a revenant was an undead creature that rose from its grave to avenge itself. As the excitement of my return from the dead once again ebbed, Castile got everyone's attention. At this point, it is safe to say Fortuna is watching over Eric. We are going to need her supervision. We leave for the elven ruins of Kelran tomorrow after Konstantin and Flavius return. Matteo was the first to break his focus off me. "Isn't that the ruins we passed on that old road? The one filled with ghosts?" Castile nodded. "Specters, not ghosts. We are going to explore the ruins and look for the entrance to a dungeon mentioned in the books recovered from the ruins a long time ago." Surprisingly, Benito asked a smart question. "Would we get another dungeon discovery fee from the Adventurers Guild if we find it?" Delmar stepped forward. "If we find it, yes. But most likely, any reward would be delayed. The Duchess needs to use the information to barter with the Emperor to add the surrounding lands, and we would also have to open the trade road." Firth groaned. "We will have to take care of that pack of dire wolves then." Delmar affirmed the announcement. "Yes, the dire wolves will need to be handled, but only after we confirm the dungeon exists and is viable. How are we going to kill the specters?" "Only Delmar and Konstantin have runic weapons," someone asked from the table far to my right. Castile couldn't contain a smile. The Duchess called in some favors. "I have 20 runic arrows for Blaze, and 15 each for Pavel and Flavius. Delmar has been given a runic long sword, and I have 2 more to assign. Those 3 were the company's best archers, so her division of arrows made sense." Adrian stepped forward. "Those 2 blades will be wielded by the best swordsman among you lot." Everyone started eyeing everyone else, trying to figure out who that would be. "Should have gotten runic spears," Firth lamented loudly enough for everyone to hear. He was an excellent spearman and average swordsman in the company. Adrian snapped at him. "What we have are blades, Firth, and we are thankful for them. This evening, we will have everyone on the training grounds to contest for the 2 blades that got ripples of excitement from the table. Any type of competition was welcome, especially one with a reward at the end. We also have a kettle of souls, men. It can permanently banish a specter so it cannot come back to hinder us again, Castile added emphatically to encourage everyone. I don't think the men knew that the specters regenerated over time in the city. Being able to vanquish them permanently was a huge boon. Adrian announced to the growing fervor of conversation. You have the remainder of the day off. Rest and enjoy your time in the city. It may be a few weeks before we see the comforts of walls again. Firth added, at least walls that are not manned by the spirits of the dead. His comedic delivery got laughs from everyone as they made their way out. Brutus came to talk with me. Can I buy the Revenant a drink in the city? I rolled my eyes and hoped this nickname disappeared as quickly as the last one had. We walked together to the establishment in the city that the other men favored. Brutus told me the ale tasted foul but was strong, and the food was decent. As we entered, I noted it was also favored by all the city and citadel guards our men had been training. We found a table, and a woman came by, and Brutus said, 2 specials and 2 ales. He leaned into me eagerly. So tell me how you escaped a dragon. Not much to tell. It was not a true dragon anyway. I paused. I was not going to tell Brutus I could heal. I was injured but was lucky as the elven summoner Konstantin had struck down with an arrow had a healing potion. That reminded me that I had 3 potions that needed to be identified by the scholar. I was nearly killed but was able to heal. The wyvern was exhausted from fighting Sebastian. It just lost its train of thought in the fight, and I prevailed. I smiled at the confused Brutus by the bullshit story. He was expecting some hero's tale, but I was no hero. We sipped ale, waiting for the food as I deflected Brutus' questions about how I prevailed. Did Quentin have a family? I asked after the legionnaire who the hill giant had killed. It was an attempt to steer the conversation away from me. Brutus was clearly frustrated at my storytelling capabilities. Quentin? Brutus recalled him with a frown as he had been one of Doranda's men with Brutus. No wife or kids. His parents owned a few sheep farms outside a city in the Western Empire. I think they were well off. He joined the Legion to learn to fight and serve the Emperor. Death was commonplace, and besides an honoring of the dead, they were generally not discussed again among the men after falling in battle. The food was brought out, and it was a small pie. Brutus paid a large copper for both of us. It was some fatty meat with carrots and gravy inside a thick crust. It was good, and we paused our conversation. After the meal, I decided to go for a ride, and Brutus followed me to the stables, still asking unanswered questions. I found Ginger in the stables, and she was upset I had left her for so long. At least, that is what I assumed, as she kept pushing her head into my chest strongly and pushing me back. Fine, girl. We can go out for a ride. After the ride, an apple is in your future. She snorted in affirmative, and I guessed she missed the apples more than me. I saddled Ginger and Brutus laughed at me for talking to a horse. But really I was trying to get away from him and his incessant questions. Eric, have fun on your ride. I will see you tonight when I gain ownership of one of the runic blades. Brutus smirked as he left. Brutus was one of the best men in the company with a spear, but had also trained with swords growing up. If I could use my air shield, I might have a good chance of claiming one of the blades. I made my way out of the citadel, and then the city. The countryside was dotted with dozens of campsites made up of wagons and improvised shelters. The Duchess bit off more than she could chew when she opened her arms to all these refugees. It might not have been so bad if food was not going to be very scarce soon. I was taking a path through the tents to get into the woods, planning to let Ginger run for a while. The closer I got to the people, the more terrible things looked for them. There was a cart from the city, and I could see 2 citadel guards and some of the servants handing out food. Lorene was not among them. Right now, hunger was not a problem. When food became an issue, things were less safe for the people. I entered the woods and started into a gallop, and Ginger responded immediately, understanding she was free to go as fast as she wanted. I got my body in sync with hers as she sprinted through the woods, churring up the soft ground. The cold, early morning air felt good on my face as I raced past surprised foragers. She lasted almost 5 minutes at a sprint before easing off and panting hard. I patted her neck as she came to a stop, and I dismounted to give her the promised apple. A few people nearby stared at us. I saw some viable blood grass and was considering harvesting it when a voice off to my left asked, "Legionnaire? Is that you? The one from the baths in Masha?" I turned to find a dirty young woman with a basket filled with tubers. 2 other young women stood just behind her, just as dirty from digging in the dirt. It took me a moment to remember the face. "Karina?" I asked, finally recognizing the young woman from Masha Baths. "It is you," she said, surprised. "I heard about Maka falling and the city walls crumbling." I said consolingly. "Did your brother make it out alive?" I asked, remembering her brother was a member of the city guard. Her dirty smile fell from her face, and tears started to well up. "I am sorry that I asked. You made it to a safe city. The Duchess is a good woman." Her throat was a little tight as she spoke. The Duchess is kind, but there is not much work for a bath girl in the city. She tried to laugh, but I could tell things were not going well for her. She looked thinner than I remembered, and her clothes were soiled from digging. Now, we try to supplement the food allocation from the woods, but are having to venture further and further from the city. It is dangerous, and we are worried about the other foragers and monsters. I went to Ginger and pretended to root around in the empty saddlebags. I pulled out a 10-pound block of hard cheese and a large jar of berry preserves from my dimensional space. I walked back to the 3 women. "Here, you can have these supplies. They were for the wardens, but I can get more. I know a few people in the city, and I might be able to find you some work." The 3 young women had wide eyes as I handed Karina the food. Karina dropped her basket and juggled the 2 heavy foodstuffs. "Where can I find you if I can find you some work?" Karina was at a loss for words, so one of the thin women behind her volunteered. "The R3 wagons forming a triangle outside the east gate of Sobral. We are sharing the blue-painted wagon there." I nodded to her and mounted Ginger. As I rode away, I mumbled something Adrian told me. "You can't save everyone, Eric. I would still try. I thought about finding them a job in the Citadel, as that seemed the safest place. Then I remembered how the Duchess used her servants. Not that I objected too hard to Lorene seducing me. I rode further into the woods and started harvesting mushrooms and flora as I thought about how to help. Then I realized that I knew one job that might help Karina. The 2 old women herbalists, Lila and Rhea, had offered to buy my excess harvests. I had yet to return them since our first meeting, but Karina and her 2 friends might be able to harvest for them. I spent until midday harvesting an assortment. Mushrooms were scarce, and bloodgrass, and most of the other flora was starting to wilt from the colder nights. I returned to the city with a sizable harvest and visited the 2 old women. "Look who decided to return, Rhea," Lila said as I entered their small herbalist shop. The mixture of sharp herbal scents hit me. I bowed. "I have been kept busy by my mage commander, but I missed your wit and charm. If you are here to sell, you are going to be disappointed with what we can offer. We are just interested in the edibles," Rhea said. I still placed everything I had found from a morning's work on the counter while Lila sorted through it, and Rhea dealt with a middle-aged male customer. When she finished, she looked up. 3 silver, 50 copper. "Best we can do at the moment. Plenty of others are coming in to sell, and we cannot process what we have." Rhea had joined Lila as the customer had bought a tincture and left. I nodded as if thinking, "What if I could find you some help? I know some of the refugees, good people." Rhea perked up. "Experienced herbalists?" she asked. "Interested?" I frowned. "No, you would have to train them." "Not interested then," Rhea said with a dismissive wave. "Food is scarce and coin tighter. We wouldn't be able to feed them, only pay them a pittance, and with the coming snow, things are going to get worse. Prices have already doubled and will double again before too long. What if I could give you some food? Not from the Duchess, but some Legion stores I have access to. It is not a lot, maybe a month's worth for the 3 women. I will also pay for their housing inside your shop. Is a silver a week for each fare." The shop had a 2nd floor, so I assumed there were multiple rooms up there. 3? Lila barked a laugh. "You are keeping 3 women satisfied. You should have come to us, boy. There are 2 of us, and we know things they don't." She chuckled, and I smiled weakly, trying not to form any mental images. I wanted to close the deal. Is it a pact then? 3 apprentices? A month's worth of food and 2 gold coins to train them for a year? I tried to press an agreement on the herbalists. Rhea seemed to be the decision-maker, and held up her hand to have me pause as she thought. No. The coin would cover housing your women, but a month's worth of food is not enough. But, in a month, it is going to take 2 silver a week to feed a single person. Getting through winter to spring is going to be hard. I did not have a shortage of coin, so I offered 6 gold for the year then. They are all young and eager and will be able to forage and harvest for you in the local woods. Young and eager? Lila smirked at me. I ignored the insinuation. The 2 old herbalist sisters got together and discussed it privately. I waited patiently for their decision. Rhea finally turned around. The 3 of them will have to share a room upstairs. They will not be paid, but we will feed and house them for the next year, and teach them what we know. 6 gold, and whatever food you can offer to help, Eric. I smiled in victory. So you did remember my name. Can I give you a little extra? I would hate for the women not to have any money to buy clothes. Lila's aged face returned a smile. Your name was kicking around in here. She tapped her temple. What investment do you have in these women? She asked curiously and maybe slightly suggestively. I went with the truth. I met one of them in Macau. The other 2 I don't even know their names. I found them in the woods foraging this morning and figured I could help. The 2 sisters looked at each other. You are a strange one, Eric. We agree to your terms. The sisters left an hour later as we wrote out a contract of sorts for them, and the 3 women. I gave them the 8 gold, mostly in silver, to take all 3 young women on as apprentices. They would be fed, housed, and paid 50 copper a week each. Both old women left their shop to go to the Blue Wagon and make them the offer. I was supposed to wait in the shop for them to return. Instead, as soon as they left, I emptied my dimensional space of most of the food. 3 jars of berry preserves, a bag of onions, 30 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of sugar, 4 jars of yeast, 2 casks of pickles, 9 massive salami links, 1 block of hard cheese, 2 large bags of mushrooms, and 2 bags of potatoes. I decided to keep the honey and my remaining ration bars. The pile of foodstuffs looked like it was enough to feed a few people for a month. I left before the sisters returned, locking the door behind me. I did not need the adulation and was just happy to know my coin had helped some people. I was at the stables in the Citadel and unsaddling Ginger. The stable boys were not here, which surprised me. A pair of guards walked by outside on patrol, and I asked, Where are the stable boys? They are probably in the center courtyard with everyone else. Your Legion company is holding a fighting competition, he replied before continuing to walk on his patrol with his partner. Did the contest for the runic blades start already? I rushed through Ginger's rub-down and fed her before rushing to the central courtyard. I thought I had a decent chance of winning one of the 2 blades for myself. I made my way to the central courtyard and found an elaborate setup. The central square of the fading gardens had been set with a thin layer of sand and sawdust. Over 100 spectators stood to watch on one side of the square. Most of the spectators were workers in the Citadel. A slightly raised wooden platform was along another edge of the square. The platform had a number of occupied seats. Castile was seated next to Duchess Veronica in the center, and a frown creased both their faces. They did not look happy to be here. A woman in a gaudy gown sat next to the Duchess, who I assumed was the Countess, Duchess Veronica's mother. On the other side of the Countess was a lean man who looked to be in his early 30s. He had a smug look, and looked happy to be watching the entertainment. Several Citadel attendants served the 4 VIP chairs on the makeshift spectator stage. Among their number was Lorene. On the third side of the square, the men of the company were getting ready for the combat. As I joined them, Maveth was in the back, and I asked him, Maveth, where have you been all day? Maveth looked surprised to see me. Eric, Castile accepted me as a huntsman for the company. He was beaming with pride. I went to my cabin to get some things and seal it from the elements and intruders while I am away. I told Trek to check on it occasionally as well. I just got back to find this. He indicated the makeshift fighting square. Mavaeth, what is with all the formality? I thought we were not going to do this until after dinner. I indicated the elaborate setup. Adrian turned and walked to me to answer the question. His tone was sour. The first citizen Boris found out about the competition and set this up and got the Duchess to force Castile to agree to it. Eric, are you going to compete? Yes, of course. Isn't everyone? I asked. I noticed Larine bringing a tray of food for First Citizen Boris. He leaned back, and they whispered to each other. So far, just 10 men are interested in the blades, Adrian informed me, which made sense. For instance, Blaze and Pavel wouldn't want to fight as they were being given runic arrows. I noticed Larine pointing at me while whispering to Boris. "Oh, Larine, what are you doing?" Adrian had a piece of paper in his hand. "You will fight Calm in the first pairings." I looked and saw Calm stretching. He was the company's ad hoc blacksmith and repaired our resin hide armor as well. He was short, but his biceps matched his thighs. He was one of the company's shield men, and I don't remember him practicing often with a sword. "Can I use my air shield when I fight?" I asked Adrian. "Yes, any spell forms are allowed. The First Citizen wants the men to fight bare-chested for the entertainment spectacle," Adrian said unhappily. "The old healer is in the crowd if anyone gets injured, but control your enthusiasm as I don't want anyone seriously injured. The first pairings will start soon." Adrian walked away to continue organizing the mini-tourney. I walked over to Colm and watched Boris subtly as I talked to Colm. Boris's eyes were definitely following me. "Colm, looks like we are paired off in the first round," I said with a smile. "Harpy's tits. Really? Why does Adrian hate me?" he said dejectedly. "You are one of the favorites," Colm admitted sourly. "I never understood that curse. Who are the other favorites?" I asked the miserable-looking Colm. Filth was quick to chime in. "Harpy's tits, Eric. You know, they look like a regular woman's, but then the rest of the creature is hideous and trying to kill you. And Brutus and I are the favorites," he said with a grin. "They have been practicing out here all day," Colm told me. Both Firth and Brutus were spearmen in the company, so I was shocked they were favorites in the sword competition. Then again, our 3 best swordsmen in the company already had runic weapons: Konstantin, Adrian, and Delmar. Benito came up behind me. "Eric heard you are fighting. Cost is 10 silver. My confused face had Benito explain. "Winner take all. Runic sword and the silver." I handed Benito the 10 silver and realized the man was a gambling addict. The men, not Adrian, established this prize purse. I returned to stand with Mavith as the first pairing was called to fight 30 minutes later after more spectators and refreshments arrived. Brutus was against Felix. Both legionnaires entered the ring in just their canvas pants and boots. Their muscled torsos held a shield and weighted wooden practice sword. Their bare feet stirred the sand as they walked. Matteo was close, and I overheard him say, "The sand and sawdust are so our blood does not stain the stones of the courtyard just like in the Colosseum." The spectators started making some noise as the 2 men engaged. My focus was on the First Citizen Boris as he frequently asked Larine questions, and his eyes drifted to me instead of the fight he had seemed anxious for. It was less than a minute before Felix was lying unconscious on the sand. The old healer moved to the sand to check on him and heal him. The next fight was between Benito and Matteo. I had not followed the fight, and was shocked when I looked up to find Benito had won. Matteo was a good swordsman and was heavily favored, but Benito was a shifty little guy. "Eric and Calm," Adrian announced the next fight. As I removed my armor to get stripped down to my canvas pants for my duel, I noticed First Citizen Boris studying me intently. I fumed as I guessed he was seeing if I was wearing the Dreamscape amulet. That was probably why he wanted us to fight bare-chested. It also meant Larine had betrayed me and told the First Citizen I had the artifact. I moved to the sand with Colm. His pale, bare chest had curly blonde hair, while his head and beard were deep black. It made him look odd. His jaw clenched, not liking his matchup with me. We both tapped our weighted wooden swords on our shields to let each other know we were ready. Colm had a strong base but moved poorly. He was used to a body shield. I circled to his left, trying to cross him up. He was prepared to turtle with a much smaller shield than he normally fought with and take opportunity attacks. As he got anxious, I moved in fast and deflected his swing on my shield. Colm had planned to use my block to surprise me with a low swing. I surprised him by stabbing him and spinning away. My wooden sword point connected where his heart was, leaving a bloody welt. Colm's sword swung through the empty air, and he winced from the pain of my strike. "Killing blow," Adrian determined, and Colm threw his shield and sword away in disgust. The Citadel workers clapped and cheered my quick victory. I looked to the platform to find Castile nodding appreciatively, and Boris' eyes narrowed. Larine held a pitcher and glass but was beaming happily at my victory. I think the Countess looked surprised and licked her lips, studying me. I went to calm and put my arm around him as he got some minor healing. I spent a few moments telling him what he did wrong. He had basically telegraphed his entire attack. Benito and Eric, Adrian announced the next match. I guess I would not be allowed any time to rest. Not that my first victory took long. I moved back to the sand and faced off against the much smaller Benito. Benito was fast, but made a lot of mistakes in one-on-one fights in practice. At least, that was my experience from all the times the company trained together. He was an excellent man to have on your side in a fight, though. Benito spun his sword in his hand, trying to show off to the crowd. We both tapped shields and engaged. I was cautious as I protected my legs, figuring he would target my knee. We clashed and tested each other. Our speed actually matched well, but I was definitely faster than I was a few weeks ago. Benito was quickly frustrated as I was being cautious and not giving him an opportunity to exploit. Benito suddenly overextended, and I slashed the wrist of his sword hand, breaking his wrist and causing him to drop his wooden sword. If he had been wearing his vambraces, it would have saved him. Benito stepped back and cursed under his breath. He dropped his shield and walked to the healer, disgusted with his own impatience. I think he thought he would win the coin and runic blade. He certainly didn't lack confidence. I looked at Adrian, smirking. Am I going to have to fight again? Or can I get a rest? You don't get a rest in battle, he replied with his own smile. The company chastised me with jeers as well at my complaint. Adrian announced the next pairing with a smirk. Brutus and Remus. Remus was the only man from Gregor's company left. He had long red hair, making him stand out from the others. As the two engaged, it was clear the two were familiar with each other, and it was no contest. Brutus was an excellent swordsman as he had been practicing since his youth. It took a few minutes, but he disarmed Remus by getting a strike on his fingers and breaking a few fingers. He followed it with a blow to the ribs, Adrian announced. Debilitating injury. Brutus wins. Brutus raised his hands in victory like a gladiator, and there was a lot of cheering from the Citadel workers. I noticed Larine hadn't cheered at either of my victories as well. I was a little envious as the spectators had not cheered as loudly for me except the stable boys, but I had bought that idolization. I rested and sipped water while watching and waiting for my next call. We were putting on a good show for the Citadel workers. Castile still looked unhappy, but the three first citizens were content with the pre-dinner entertainment we provided. We were not trying to be fancy in our fighting, as winning was more important than giving them a show. The company men did not care about their happiness. Fighting without armor was not something we practiced, so it was expected that we would make mistakes. As they happened, I studied the other fights, and soon we were down to just 4. Firth, Brutus, Soren, and myself. Soren was one of the quiet ones in the company. Rumor had it he had killed a baker for selling him moldy bread. I doubted that was true, as I had never seen the man go into a rage before. Brutus and Soren, Adrian announced. Firth moved to stand next to me. Looks like we are paired next, Eric. I will go easy on you and not make you look too bad. If you drop me 2 gold, I will even let you win, he said with a smirk, holding out his hand. I was pretty sure even if I paid him the 2 gold, he would go all out. For 20 gold, I will let you win, paid up front though. I returned with my own offer and grin. Firth walked away smiling and confident with no gold exchanged. I knew he served a Praetorian guard, and maybe he was more skilled than he was showing. His job was to eliminate Castile if she did anything against the Empire's interests. Brutus won his fight against Soren, but was not yet guaranteed a runic blade. Adrian announced, Congratulations, Brutus. One of the blades is yours. You will still need to fight the winner of Firth and Eric in order to determine who picks first. Adrian roared to the crowd and waved his hands as he got into the event spirit. The only issue was the healer seemed to be out of either after healing Soren. I stood across from Firth on the stand. His eyes were hard and focused on me. I could tell Firth was planning to go all out. I thought about using my air shield in the fight. I had not needed it so far, but I had a feeling Firth was hiding his true ability. We tapped shields and circled. I tuned out the crowd and took in Firth's movements. The caution in his steps betrayed his skill. It reminded me of Xavier, the swordmaster. He was trying to show as little as possible, but there were hints of it. Firth, the brothel-loving legionnaire, was more than he seemed. He flashed forward, and I defended and countered with my shield. I heard someone in the company mutter that Firth was faster than normal today, and I thought the same thing. He continued to press, and I was hard-pressed to block and parry. He finally stepped back after nearly a minute, breathing heavily. "Eric, you have gotten much better. This should have been over by now." I could see his heavy eyes and guessed maybe he had used a spell form. I was guessing by the familiar, exhausted look in his eyes from using all your ether. It was a weak spell form, if that was what it was, and he had almost no ether to sustain it if he was already out. Firth saluted me with his sword. I concede the duel to Eric, to the disappointment of the crowd and Boris in particular. Firth walked off of the sand. I thought it was a very even match, perhaps even slightly tilted in Firth's favor. Whatever he did to elevate himself had drained him considerably, and he chose to concede rather than lose in front of everyone. Or maybe he had used his one trick, or did not want to. I was not the only man in the company with secrets. Adrian seemed puzzled and shocked as well. I walked off the sand to stand by Maveth, even though the next fight was mine. Benito moved close. "Eric, that was impressive. I don't feel so as useless as tits on a minotaur now for losing to you," Maveth intoned, trying to educate Benito. "There are female minotaurs with functional breasts, Benito." Matteo, who was nearby, asked, "How does minotaur milk taste? Is it the same as cow's milk?" There was a small commotion on the stage as the two blades were brought out and placed at the feet of Duchess Veronica. Adrian called us forward. "Brutus and Eric, come forward and look upon your blade choices." The Citadel workers were crowding and craning their necks to see. I walked with Brutus and looked upon the two long swords. Each blade was about 33 inches with a hilt of 8 inches. Both blades had runic markings, but one was tarnished, black, and pitted. The other blade was polished steel and ancient-looking. Duchess Veronica smiled down at both of us. "Two blades from my mother's family guards. They have been loaned to me by my mother's grace. The last runic smith of the Telian Empire forged the dark blade for its intended purpose. It has fought in hundreds of battles and served its wielders well. The orcs of the Bhutan Caliphate forged the other blade. It was claimed in battle by my grandfather from an orc warrior. Brutus caught the same thing in the explanation that I did. He asked, after the expedition to the Elven ruins, the blades have to be returned?" The Duchess smiled. "Yes, unless you wish to enter my service. In that case you can keep the blade and wield it to defend me." Brutus frowned as he felt he had been scammed. I looked at Castile. She looked like she had already been aware of the condition. Adrian interrupted our dismay at not being able to retain the blades after the expedition. Eric and Brutus moved to the center and prepared to fight. As I moved onto the sand, I figured it made sense as a runic blade was worth 1,000 gold, according to Delmar. Although the two blades we were fighting for were not nearly as immaculate as the Delmars or Konstantins. Delmars had come from a dungeon, and an elven smith forged Konstantin's. Brutus still seemed determined to win, even though the prize was temporary. We tapped shields, and Brutus engaged with vigor. We danced and kicked up sand as swords clattered on shields at a rapid tempo. The men of the company cheered us both as we circled. "You are better than I remember," Brutus said after I intercepted 3 quick successive attacks. "Maybe you are just getting slow in your old age," I countered with a smile and counterattack. "I am younger than you," he barked, as he launched into a series that was familiar to me from my time with Xavier, and I dodged and backed away, letting him expend his energy in futility. I could see the consternation and frustration building on his face. I still had not even used an air shield yet. I was beginning to think my dreamscape practice was more effective than my practice in the real world. Brutus was better with a shield than I was. I was learning a lot by how his minimal movements prevented me from taking advantage of his openings. The fight was the longest fight of the evening, and the crowd loved it, and I was feeding off the growing noise. Brutus tried a trick that ended the fight. He tried to hook the corner of his shield on mine and pull it away to expose me. I had experienced this same act in my dreamscape from Konstantin. So when I noticed his shield caught mine and tugged on my arm for what it was, I used it against him, creating my own opening. My swing was powerful and directed at his knee. Brutus realized it and tried to turn away from the strike to lessen the impact. I still connected, just not as solidly. Debilitating injury, Adrian called immediately, ending the fight. I think Adrian was concerned about making sure everyone was healthy before we left, as the healer was exhausted. Brutus limped away and had trouble putting weight in the leg. I think I shattered his patella. I made sure Brutus was fine, but he was angry about losing. The healer needed a few hours before he could heal him, but Brutus assured me he was going to be fine. That was a quick counter, Eric. I didn't see it coming. A well-deserved victory. He clapped me on the back in both congratulations and assistance to stand. You should go and choose your blade, as the first citizens do not look happy to be kept waiting. Silence spread in the crowd as I walked to the platform and inspected the two blades again under the gaze of the Duchess, her family, and Castile. I picked up the tarnished blade and tested its weight. Then I did the same for the other one. The black blade was slightly heavier and appeared to have a better edge, even with the odd aging on its length. I will take this one, I indicated the darker blade. The Duchess's eyebrows went up in surprise, as it was probably the lesser of the two artifacts. First, Citizen Boris drew attention to himself by clapping loudly. Good display of skills, Legionnaire. I want to test myself against the best swordsman today. I am sure Mage Castile will give me the honor to exercise with this evening's winner in front of the assembled crowd. Boris had essentially challenged me in front of everyone. I looked to Castile, who had been uncomfortable with the whole display, and now she even wore a frown. I looked back at Adrian and Delmar, and neither offered me help dealing with the first citizen. First Citizen Boris had the unmistakable smile of someone who thought they were better than you. He walked out onto the sand while I sheathed my new black blade. Boris spoke again. That sword you claimed is a family heirloom. The first captains of our Citadel Guard wielded it for centuries. My grandfather told me it was a gift from a third emperor to his great-grandfather. I had a feeling this was set up, and I was waiting for him to get to his point. I will keep it safe and return it after our exploration of the elven ruins, I said cautiously. He smiled like a snake oil salesman. Perhaps while you have my family's blade in your care, I can hold something of yours in case you do not return. And there it was. I looked to Castile, who had a dark look on her face directed at Boris. Larine was conveniently behind one of the large chairs on the stage, and her back was turned to me. I looked for any support or clue on what to do. Duchess Veronica spoke. I gave Mother a fair price for the blade, Boris. It is not yours to barter with. Boris ground his teeth at his sister's remark and being interrupted. Fine. I still wish to practice with the Legionnaire. Perhaps he would care for a bet on the outcome. Something of equal value to this. I sensed this first citizen was not too bright, as he was making things up after his original plan failed. He drew his sword. The blade reminded me of Delmar's dungeon-made long blade. The blade shimmered in the light of the fading sun, appearing to ripple like water. Boris's mother, Countess Acella, barked. Boris, no. Her voice was laced with anger. He has nothing of worth to match it, and that blade is still mine until you take my seat as Count. Her anger seemed genuine, so I did not sense she was party to this sham. But he does, Mother. This Legionnaire has a dreamscape amulet, he announced to everyone present. I heard Benito ask someone loudly, "What is a dreamscape amulet?" My eyes were focused on Castile, whose eyebrows showed surprise as she locked eyes on me in question. Larine was now missing from the stage entirely, hiding from my irate gaze. Whispers started running through the crowd, trying to figure out what a dreamscape amulet was. My companions seemed just as perplexed at the unfolding events. Boris's grin split his face at the commotion he had caused, thinking he had scored a victory. The Countess was weighing something in her mind. He spun in a circle as he spoke so everyone could hear him, like a showman at a circus. As I told you last night, Mother, a dreamscape amulet is a dungeon artifact allowing you to control your dreams. You can practice with swords, read a book, fight monsters, or fuck every woman you ever met in whatever manner pleases you. The Countess finished her internal deliberations and gave him a small nod to approve the bet. "I refuse," I stated flatly. "I refuse," I stated flatly. "The duel and the wager." I turned my back on Boris and walked back to the company. They seemed half curious about the amulet and smirking at my dismissal of the first citizen. Matteo intercepted me and asked as I reached the group, "Where did you find a dreamscape amulet, Eric? Sounds like it would be, educational. Can I try it?" Behind me, Boris had not given up and turned his attention to the platform. "Mage Castile, surely you would not deny me a friendly contest and wager? I wish to fight your company champion." Castile grimaced. I knew she hated dealing with first citizens, and did not hide this fact on her face as she stood. Castile walked off the stage and passed the haughty Boris to join the company. She came straight at me and walked past me, and I moved to join her to talk together in private. "Do you really have it? A dreamscape amulet?" I considered my reply for just a moment and admitted. "Yes, interesting," she said, considering and with no anger showing. "That is how you have been studying and learning your spell forms so quickly. Did you steal it from Durandus? Or take it from a corpse of one of the Barteradians?" she questioned. "No, I had it before Maka," I replied quietly. Castile nodded slowly, her mind working. "Then it is your possession, unless the dungeon." Castile was too smart for her own good. I nodded subtly, not denying it. She coughed, seemingly amused. She shook her head in disbelief while in consideration. "Well, do not tell anyone you took it from a dungeon while in my mage company. The Empire has the right of purchase, especially from a legionnaire conscript." She looked at the smug Boris, waiting impatiently. "He cannot force you to fight. As a first citizen, he could try to force you to sell it to him, but I doubt he has enough gold to buy it if it does what he says." She thought for a moment. "Veronica told me a little about her older brother Boris. He is spiteful. If he can't get the amulet, he will spread the word you have it to others." "Castile, what should I do?" I sought her advice in a pleading tone. I was not giving the first citizen prick my amulet. Castile looked over her shoulder at Boris, who was playing to the small crowd. "Do you think you can win? You have improved greatly, but Boris is an accomplished swordsman. He practices 3 hours every morning in the courtyard and has fought in dozens of competitions. Can I use my spell form?" "Does he have a spell form?" I asked quietly. "He does. Veronica said he can harden his skin and can enhance his strength. He is no mage, of that I am sure." She informed me. "Then yes, I can win," I replied confidently. Lorene didn't know I had the air shield, so that meant Boris didn't know either. "You will be making an enemy," she cautioned. "Your amulet is no longer a secret either." I shrugged, as the whole company knew now anyway. "Not that I was planning to let them use it. I will talk with the first citizens with your permission to get everything formalized." Castile waited till I nodded. She went to the platform, and the Duchess, Countess, and Boris convened with Castile. Boris was confident as he waved his hand to rush the conversation. He had watched me fight and probably thought he had a good measure of my ability. It took almost 20 minutes and some time to write things out formally after that. Castile finally announced the duel, with the Duchess holding the parchment with the conditions. The crowd's anticipation was about to be quenched as Castile spoke. "First Citizen Boris and Legionnaire Eric have agreed to a duel. The first person incapacitated or yielding will be deemed the loser. The winner will take both prizes with them." Castile smirked. "Duchess Veronica will hold the prizes during the contest." Boris turned his head abruptly, realizing he would not be fighting with his runic weapon. Castile had outmaneuvered the not-so-bright Boris. It also meant I needed to take the amulet out of my space and hand it over to the Duchess. Boris agreed after a short argument before sending a runner for another weapon. I walked and reluctantly handed the amulet to Castile, who brought it to the Duchess, who started studying the artifact intently while we waited. I was worried she might try to use it, but she didn't fall asleep in her chair before placing it down. A guard from the Countess's men came rushing in and drew his blade for the first citizen. The blade was another runic weapon, but had a dull polish, and I guessed a runic blacksmith had forged it. Boris swung the new blade twice and seemed content. He moved to meet me in the center of the sand, his confidence still evident. Castile looked at both of us, Acknowledge you are both ready. I tapped my blade on the shield. I would have used the black blade, but it was a few inches longer than what I was accustomed to. Boris tapped his sword on his shield, and I frowned, realizing it also had runic patterns, and thought I might have made a mistake. Begin, Castile said, backing away. Boris started to circle me, and I did likewise. The men of the company were getting loud, and their support had quite an array of colorful words. I circled faster and created an arc of windshields around the unsuspecting Boris. Boris's skin got darker as he turned to follow my movement. My biggest advantage was the air shields were only visible to me. When they were at his back, I stepped forward, and he prepared to receive my attack. Instead, I just added more air shields, boxing him in. This was one of Konstantin's ideas, but he was not here to take credit for it. It was too late when he realized the trap as Boris felt the first air shield at his elbow. His confidence evaporated as he searched for movement, as I narrowed his confinement before the shields dissipated. I set the air shields off the ground, just above his knee to over his head. He worked his runic weapon into an air shield, trying to destroy the invisible shields, while I swung in an arc low at his feet. He jumped to avoid the swipe, but his head met another shield I had placed over his head. My sword slashed his shin but barely penetrated. He really did have magically hardened skin. I had thought my first strike would have ended the fight. I slashed again as he destroyed the first air shield, giving him an escape route. However, this time I cut deeper. My third strike targeted his Achilles. I did not get much penetration on the tendon, but it was enough as he went to one knee. Although I had tried to tune out the noise, Adrian's command voice reached me through the shouts. Do not let up till he yields, Eric. Boris had produced a potion and was going to drink it. I could see the gaps in my shields that would expire soon, and I lunged forward to stab the Boris in the ribs. The tip of my blade barely entered 4 inches into him, and I could feel it grating on bone as it reached the liver. I yanked the sword sideways, cutting his organs. The sudden pain caused Boris to drop the potion and his sword while his mother screamed for someone to help him. My adrenaline started to fade, and the crowd noises returned. Castile declared, Boris is incapacitated. Do you agree, Countess? Heal him. She yelled at the old healer in the crowd. Ignoring Castile, I removed my blade, and blood oozed from the wound as Boris clutched at it. Dark blood flowed, and the old man kneeled to help. Castile interrupted. Boris, do you yield? Boris nodded, his eyes slightly glassy. Castile nodded, and the burnt healer started sweating as he forced ether painfully through himself to heal Boris. I waited while the healer struggled after closing the wound. I had probably damaged more than the liver, and the healer was already very low on ether from helping men in the company today. Castile picked up the potion and fed it to Boris. His complexion went from pale to slightly pink. It was a full healing potion, so I knew he would live. A few minutes later, Boris stood. The old healer could not, and was clearly in a lot of pain from using too much ether in his burnt channels. Matteo and Felix came to help the healer stand and assisted to a bench to sit. Matteo hissed as he passed me carrying the healer. Amazing, Eric. I still want to try your amulet. Boris was angry as he regained himself. I did not concede or request outside assistance. The fight is still in process. Castile shook her head, hiding a smug expression from Boris. The Countess was assigned proxy. She called for outside assistance, and it was given. First Citizen Boris, the contest is over. Duchess Veronica could not hide her own smirk. Brother, this is my citadel, and I rule you lost by the terms written. The prizes belong to the legionary. Boris fumed and stormed away, seeing he would not get any assistance from his sister. The Duchess was clearly happy with the outcome, and her brother being embarrassed. Castile was right in that I had made an enemy today. Mevith's huge hand clapped me on the back, causing me to stumble toward it. Soon, I was surrounded by men of the company, receiving congratulations and praise. I forced my way past them to the platform to get my prizes, sending the amulet to storage and picking up Boris' dungeon blade. Duchess Veronica looked down at me, smiling. That was an interesting means of achieving victory. I congratulate you on a well-earned victory and prizes. Countess Acela approached furiously. Cannot keep the blade, Veronica. Have him return it immediately. I looked between the mother and daughter, each of them challenging the other with lighting stares. I would probably be made a target if I carried a runic weapon like that. I addressed Duchess Veronica. Are the black blade and Boris' blade equal in value? Could I trade you Boris' blade for the black one to keep? I knew I was getting the worst end of this deal, but I would end up with a runic blade either way. I was thinking the aged black blade was fairly inconspicuous compared to the shiny dungeon blade. Castile eyed the Duchess as she considered a response. They had formed a good relationship, and the Duchess was not going to ruin it. I agree to your terms. The dungeon blade is twice the value. Would you accept both blades? She indicated the orc-forged blade that was intended for Brutus. Castile nodded approvingly at me, and I took it that was a fair trade. I picked up the other blade and left Boris's blade on the stage. I guess that blade now belonged to Duchess Veronica. The fireworks between the Countess and Duchess were not over, and I tried to retreat. Matteo asked me again to borrow the amulet. Just for one night, Eric. You need to be able to channel either to use it, Matteo, I told him, walking past. Of course, someone else could probably activate it for him, but I was not certain of that. Matteo frowned. I passed Adrian and told him, I will be in the Northwest Tower getting some rest. I was happy Mavaith was on my heels. I was sure he would be a deterrent to mischief by Boris until we left in the morning for the ruins. I did not head directly to the tower. Instead, I veered off and went to the library. I wanted to talk with Scholar Flavius about some elven potions and daggers. With Mavaith trailing me, I entered the library. Scholar Flavius was sorting books on a table. Eric, I am not ready yet. Trying to decide which books will be most helpful on the expedition. You are coming to the haunted ruins? I asked, surprised at the old scholar's statement. Of course. Are you not here to pack my things? Mage Castile said. Half of your dimensional space is at my disposal, and you and Mavaith would carry my pack and food. But I think I can carry my own food, he added with a wink. I stacked a few books on top of each that he was not using. This is about half the size of the space. Scholar. I realized the other half of my space was probably going to be the potions from Decimus. It would mean I would not be able to pull extra items out of my dimensional space during the expedition, and I was going to have to suffer and carry my gear like everyone else. Flavius started using the pile to sort and resort his chosen books. He hemmed and hawed as he made life-or-death decisions in his mind. I waited patiently while he finished, stacking 8 tomes next to my pile. There. All of the books with maps of or pictures of the ancient elven city. I wish I had time to copy them, as I only need a few pages of each. I moved the selected books to storage. Flavius frowned. I was still going to cross-reference a few things, never mind. I should focus on packing my other gear. I took the opportunity to ask a question. Flavius, I recently fought the elven summoners and took this as a prize. Can you tell me anything about it? I placed the runic dagger on the table. Mavaith's eyes went wide. That is an exquisite dagger. You already had a runic weapon? Now you have 3, Mavaith said in awe. I shrugged. This is actually a secret. I would prefer it if no one knew I had it, even if people found out. I was unconcerned. I thought I could sell the dagger eventually, and the more I knew about it, the better I could negotiate the price. I was also testing the waters on whether I would ask Flavius to read the script on the 3 elven potions. Scholar Flavius handled the blade delicately as he studied. Mavaith is right. This is a piece of artwork. He studied the runic script and other markings on the blade. I cannot read runes. I cannot read runes. You will need to have the Adventurers Guild use a revelation scroll on it, or find an enchanter to decipher them. Most blades have durability, sharpness, or ever-clean runes on them, but I can tell you what these markings are. He indicated the fine script along the blade. Mavaith leaned in to look over my shoulder as I studied where he pointed. And it was similar to the elven script I had seen in the books. Scholar Flavius smiled. It is a legacy blade. See this fine, tiny script here. These are the names of everyone who has been gifted the blade and when they received it. I am unfamiliar with the calendar system, so I cannot age the weapon. Can you read the names? Mavaith asked curiously. There are 5 here. Elu Ajoriath, Fildara Glavian, Shera Glavian, Alien Glavian, and Raelia Glavian. All feminine names, if I am not mistaken. Probably a gift given from mother to daughter when they come of age. But that is just my guess. He pointed. This here is the forger's mark. It is not a name, and I have not studied the famous elven smiths, so I cannot tell you if it is significant. The last name Favian read was Raelia Glaven. Was that the name of the nearly dead elf griffin rider in my storage? Most likely, she was going to be made into an essence when I had the opportunity. Knowing her name made me feel a little guilty about it, but it was unlikely to change my mind. I had the 2 elven backpacks, but both were larger than my dimensional storage, so I would have to search those in private to avoid questions. I was assuming they had food and camping gear. If I even had some private time as we moved out in the morning to explore the ruins of Kelran, I took the dagger and sent it to my dimensional space. Mavith stood up from his crouch. I found one other interesting thing on the summoner. I randomly produced one of the potions and handed it to him. The off-green liquid appeared viscous in the test tube-sized vial. I will not question the method of obtaining these. I heard you were left behind to fight a dragon by yourself, Scholar Favian said, taking the potion interested. I told you I was a messenger rider in the army. Sometimes we do things out of necessity in battle. He studied the script. This is the alchemist's mark here. The date is here with expected efficacy. The potion is named Dominant Creature. There is a book in the Duchess's library that talks about potions. Give me a moment. Favian excitedly went to the magic section, took just a few seconds to pull the book he wanted, and returned. Eagerly paging through it, he found the entry. A dominant creature potion allows the imbiber to beguile a beast. They will think you are friendly, and if you are able to communicate with them, will perform tasks for you. The greater the intellect and resilience of the creature, the more likely they are to resist the effect. He handed me the book, and I returned the potion to my dimensional space. I am just going to page through this book. I have been working with Decimus, and I am interested in the different types of potions an alchemist can brew, I said, sitting in the chair. There are probably very few alchemists in the Empire that can brew that potion. The upper right has difficulty brewing it. Tier 4, Favian said. I saw 4 stars after the name and nodded my thanks. I paged through the book while Mavith waited for me and then replaced it on the shelf. Thank you, Favian, I said, shaking wrists with the aging scholar. Mavith waited for me and we headed to the tower. I found Matteo and Felix in our room playing checkers. I got next game, Mavith said excitedly, going to the table. Matteo looked at Felix. I told you he would eventually come back here. He focused on me, Delmar said, to find you and have you see the alchemist and scholar about filling your space. Felix interrupted. I was told to find you. Matteo just followed me like a puppy. He has not shut up about your dreamscape amulet and its possibilities. Eric is going to let me try it out. Right, Eric, Matteo said pleadingly. I told you need to be able to channel your aether, Matteo, I said as Matteo deflated. Are Konstantin and Flavius back yet? I moved to start preparing my gear on my bed. Matteo was sulking by filling a goblet from the ale cask. Felix answered while starting a game with Mavith. No, they have not returned. Brutus looking for you, too. Said you have his sword, he chuckled. Matteo was on his second cup. How did you get so good with the blade, Eric? I remember when you joined us a few months ago. You couldn't beat a single one of us in the company. Konstantin, I offered as an answer. Matteo nodded at that, knowing how hard Konstantin had worked with me when he had trained me. When I finished packing, I went to the alchemist floor above. Decimus was working furiously between multiple processes. Eric, give me 20 minutes. No, wait, watch that table and release the pressure if it gets too high. I ended up helping Decimus for over 2 hours. A few hours ago, I was a celebrated company champion, and now I was the alchemist's lackey. Decimus' skin had returned to normal, but was drenched in sweat as he worked. Eric, thank you. I wanted to try a run at the lesser healing potions since Castile is leaving tomorrow. Put these 6 in your storage immediately. The harmonization was not powerful, but I think they will work. Also, there are 20 vials of healing salve over there. My processing is getting better, and they should last a good amount of time. He sat down exhausted in his chair. You mean you are not coming with us? I asked with a smile he didn't catch. Decimus jumped up suddenly. Nervous. What? Did Castile say I was going with the company? His face was showing panic and fear. No, I just thought you might want to go. Scholar Favian is going, I said, trying not to laugh at his comical fear. Then again, I had become numb to danger, and had not even thought about going to an undead city. I was not sure if I was not afraid or just certain I would somehow find a way out of the situation. Decimus relaxed, seeing he was not recruited. I am happy in my tower. However, Sobril is not what I expected. The people have no spare coin for my remedies. Now, with winter almost here, I will lack fresh ingredients, and harmonizing potions is going to become challenging. I took the vials he indicated, and was disappointed he had no more mouthwash for me. I wished Decimus well and went downstairs. Matteo was gone, and Felix and Navaith were still playing checkers. We headed down for the evening meal in the barracks. We sat with Firth. Firth gave me an unhappy stare, probably for besting him and winning the blade. Firth still dispensed the gossip. The Countess is moving her men into the barracks after we leave tomorrow. Apparently, they are staying through winter as the war with the Barteradians is intensifying. Felix inquired while eating half a roasted chicken with his hands. Where are we going to stay when we return? First, we need to return, Firth said hotly. Focus on that. The meal proceeded in silence after Firth's comment. I ended up watching a dice game after eating. Benito was running it, and he seemed to win more often than not. They were only playing for coppers, but I still turned down an invitation. Konstantin and Flavius are back, Blaise said from the door. Both scouts entered the dining hall after him to cheers as Konstantin held up the prize, the essence collector. Flavius scanned the room, found me, and locked eyes with me for a moment before turning away. Delmar appeared, and the two scouts followed him to meet with Castile and Adrian. I was a little worried that they had not asked me to join them. I was the one who had killed the wyvern and wondered what they had figured out. I watched the dice game, and the longer Konstantin and Flavius took, the more paranoid I became. Delmar was with them when they returned, and Delmar approached me with purpose. Eric, did you get the potions from the alchemist? He asked quickly. Yes, 20 salves and 6 lesser healing, but he thinks the efficacy period is short on the lesser healing, so I need to keep them stored, I reported. Good, Castile wants to see you. She is in the last room down that hallway, Delmar pointed. He then raised his voice for the dozen men still in the dining room. Get to your bunks. Breakfast at first light, and then we march. Groans erupted, but everyone began cleaning up. I stood and walked down the hallway Delmar had indicated. These were the officer rooms for the barracks, and there were 4 of them. The last door on the right was open. Castile was in the room looking at some items on the table. A single bed was against the wall under a small window. She looked at me quizzically. Eric, come in and shut the door behind you. I closed the door and took the only other seat at the table across from Castile. I was seated across from Castile, a worn dark oak table between us. 2 gold rings, a silver necklace, and some folded papers were on the table. She studied me until I started to get uncomfortable. Castile broke the silence. Can I see the amulet? I didn't hesitate, and I put the amulet on the table. Castile picked it up and turned it in her hands. I was watching her eyes to see if she used it. She eventually put it down, never having tested it. I never heard them called dreamscape amulets before. There were 2 of these at the mage college, usable only by the first citizens and under the supervision of a high mage. They could help you learn new spells in weeks instead of months. Castile made strong eye contact. How did Boris know you had this? I winced. It was Lorene. The servant assigned to me. She caught me using it. She promised not to tell anyone. Castile's eyebrows raised in a mocking visage. I will talk with the Duchess. I am sure Lorene will be suitably punished for not informing her before her brother. That made me feel slightly better, but still, she had betrayed me, and the secret was out. She pushed it back toward me, like pushing away a temptation. Secure it. Duchess Veronica is not letting her brother do any message sendings, but we are certain he will plan to obtain it, or use its existence to gain favor from another powerful first citizen. I felt like this amulet was about to become an albatross. I took the amulet and stored it. Castile did not ask to use it, but her body language hinted that she wanted to. Castile indicated the items on the table. These are the artifacts found on Sebastian, behind Castile. The collector was also on the bed. The maps and instructions from the summoner are in Elvish, she indicated in the papers. I winced again, realizing I had not searched his body thoroughly. I directed my attention to the table. The rings did not have any runic markings on them. They are magical? I don't see any markings on the rings. The silver necklace clearly had a unique pattern in the links. Castile frowned. Dungeon rings are typically just silver, gold, or platinum bands. Only when they are in use or heated in a flame will their runic workings appear. She picked up one of the rings. I do not know their function, but yes, they are dungeon artifacts. After studying the ring, she put it down. After we leave for the ruins of Kelran, the Duchess will compose a message sending to the capital. If Sebastian has an heir, they will go to him or her. If he does not have an heir, the registry of artifacts will be consulted. If any of the items are listed there, they will be turned over to the Empire. Castile turned around to look at the essence collector. Almost all essence collectors are registered in the Empire, so I will hold on to that until they request it be returned. She let a small smirk escape. Of course, once we march with it, we will have no means of communication, as I do not know the message-sending spell. I figured out her plan. Castile and the Duchess had plotted, so she would be able to keep the essence collector for this one assignment. I asked, and the rings and necklace? I will try to figure out their function tonight. They will remain with the Duchess, though. Most likely, Duke Octavian will come looking for them, she said with spite. I don't understand. Duke Octavian? I asked, bewildered. Castile clenched her teeth. Flavius informed me Master Mage Sebastian's estate is in Duke Octavian's province. If he has no heir, and Flavius thinks he does not, then all his property will revert to Octavian. Why just not report the recovery of the items and keep them? I offered a simple solution. If the items are not registered, that could work. But I do not know what is and what isn't. The collector is definitely registered. But these? Castile looked at the rings and necklace. If we did not try to get them to their proper place, a truth-seeker would discover the deception eventually. Castile straightened, and her tone turned serious. We have avoided why I asked you here long enough. Konstantin and Flavius are both suspicious of you. The wyvern had no wounds and no poison works that fast. With her tone change, I got uncomfortable. What happened to, if you don't know, you cannot tell the truth-seekers, I said slowly. Castile pursed her lips and frowned. She was more direct. I am not asking you anything. I am telling you Konstantin and Flavius will be watching you more closely. If Konstantin watched me any closer, his head would be stuck in my ass, I joked. That got a small smile from Castile. Her smile faded. Konstantin knows you can heal. I expect any future training sessions are going to be more intense, Castile said. I groaned, as that had been one of my bigger fears. Do you know Konstantin's spell forms? Castile suddenly asked. He knows your secrets. It is fair you know his. He has a form of telekinesis. He can move small objects, I answered, and Castile nodded. When I did not offer any more, she supplied them. He can tell if something is poisonous. My blood suddenly chilled, and Castile smirked at my discomfort. Only poisons that come from plants, though. It is a weak spell form from the nature affinity. He has a third as well. Another weak spell form that is actually extremely useful. It allows him to get a full night's rest in 4 hours. That bastard! That is how he is always up before me. That is just cheating. I spat in disgust at the unfairness. Castile asked, amused. You can heal yourself, turn air into defensive shields, have a secret storage, and have a training amulet. I think you have the advantage over Konstantin. Castile did not even mention that I was working on a spell form for time. So, you just wanted to warn me? I asked Castile. Castile rubbed her brow, trying to come up with a way to explain it. Yes, and, no, also, that the amulet complicates things. Konstantin will soon hear from the others that you have it, and he will tell his Praetorian guard master, and Boris will continue to pursue it. It is going to draw a lot of attention to myself and the company. I was confused. I couldn't believe such a small device could cause so many problems. Then what do you want me to do? Give it away? Flee the Empire? I said the latter in jest. But the thought often crossed my mind. Castile's eyes danced with indecision. No, it is not yet time we do that. A cold feeling ran down my spine. Castile had just confirmed some of my suspicions. She had clearly used the word we. She had been grooming me to help her flee the Empire. At least, that is what I was interpreting from her words. It had been intentional on her part, as I read her eyes. I waited for her to continue. You could always sell the amulet or seek protection from a first citizen. The Duchess, I asked, trying to read her intentions. Castile was impassive as she answered sadly, If you wish to enter her service, then you could. I know a few men of the company who would take her up on her offer. She did not sound bitter, though. I also suspect that the Duchess is already working with Konstantin's Praetorian master. Konstantin working for the Duchess, I said. I was extremely confused. Castile deliberated in silence, deciding what to tell me. No, it is not that simple. I think Antonia Segreto is using the Duchess to keep me safe. Antonia Segreto? The merchant queen you thought is Konstantin's handler? I asked. Handler, interesting way of putting it, Eric. But yes, while Firth is here to ensure I don't betray the Empire, Konstantin appears to be here to ensure I do not get myself killed. She has some purpose for me, and I do not know what it is, Castile disclosed. Is that why he pushed us so hard to get to the capital for the tribunal? I asked. Partly so, I believe. He also has some loyalty in him, Castile said softly as her thoughts wandered briefly. Too many things were playing through my mind. Castile was a peasant raised to power and caught in the politics of the Empire. She obviously was hoping to escape one way or another. Konstantin had been a mentor, a tough mentor, but still a mentor. But his true motives were hidden. Castile let me consider everything for a few minutes. I finally chose to side with Castile. What do you need me to do? Castile's lips twitched in a brief smile. Stay close to Konstantin. Ask him for help in protecting your amulet. Castile let her words sink in before adding, If you can get him to divulge what Antonia Segreto has planned for me, it would help enormously. So this is what it had come down to. I was to spy on Konstantin. Konstantin keeps hinting that I should join the hounds, I said after considering her words. Castile wavered a moment before admitting, He did mention it to me. He thought it would be beneficial for you, in case you had cause to flee the Empire. That is knowing how your pursuers work. It was like lightning striking. Konstantin thinks I am going to flee. Castile laughed softly. I think he is more surprised you are still here. He has tracked more than a few legionnaires in his time. And the first day you arrived, he warned me you had all the signs of a runner. I thought on it for a moment. So I should ask Konstantin about working for Antonia. Before she may have seen you as useful as a smuggler, but now you are actually a competent soldier with self-healing. Castile paused, maybe realizing how attractive I was to recruit. I committed to Castile's side, not seeing many options. I understand, and will try to gain Konstantin's confidence. Castile nodded but didn't smile. If you need help in the future, you can trust Adrian, Felix, Matteo, and Blaze. I tilted my head before figuring out what Castile was hinting at. If I decided to leave the Empire, as she was planning, then those four would be trustworthy. Matteo, really. I asked about the legionnaire who did not know how to hold his tongue. I was also surprised Delmar was not among the names mentioned. Castile nodded. Foolish with his tongue, but loyal and brave beyond measure. Ask him about his family sometime. It is a fascinating tale. I stood. I should get some rest for tomorrow's march. Are you going to loan one of your new blades to Brutus? Castile asked as I made to leave. Before we reach the ruins, yes. I want to try them both before deciding which to keep. Castile nodded approvingly, and I left. I returned to the northwest tower to find Maveth animatedly talking with Flavius and Konstantin. Maveth was retelling of the competition and how I had won the day against the first citizen. Konstantin had Maveth pause. So those are yours now? He pointed at the two runic blades on my bed with my pack. I nodded and studied Konstantin. Maybe it was just the talk with Castile, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. Flavius was ignoring me completely as he packed his own bag. I noticed a bundle of silvery arrows on the bed, so he must have received the runic arrows already. Maveth broke the silence. Benito brought you this. His large hand dumped a mess of silver into my hand. 10 large silver and 40 small. Maveth informed me. Benito had set up a betting pool for the tourney, and I won. I moved the coins to my storage. Yes, Konstantin. I am going to loan one of the blades to Brutus. And you heard about the amulet as well? I said, sitting on my bed, my face impassive. From Matteo, yes. Sounds useful. I hope you are using it well, he said indifferently. Mavis could feel the tension in the room and asked, Does anyone want to play checkers? Konstantin disappointed Mavis. We should all get some rest. It is going to be a long walk tomorrow. After inspecting the wyvern, I knew both Konstantin and Flavius had questions about me. Laying down, I prepared. I moved the amulet to my hand and entered the dreamscape. I only spent a few moments encasing the bookshelf inside a rock wall in the scorpion room before returning. I returned the amulet to my space for safety. The only way someone could claim it was by killing me, forcing the contents of my space into the real world. As I settled into an uncomfortable sleep, the unpleasant dreams came quickly. No matter where I went in my dreams, someone wanted the amulet. It started with Matteo asking incessantly to borrow it on the march. Then it was Konstantin's Praetorian master trying to get it from me, in exchange for her protection. Then it was First Citizen Boris demanding to fight me for it over and over. I beat him down every time. Konstantin was up first and kicked the bed to wake me. Time to wake, Eric. We have an hour before breakfast. Let's see if you deserve to carry those blades. I was awake instantly, but it was still dark outside, and Konstantin held a glowstone. Am I still dreaming? I asked myself softly, even though I knew this was not a dream. Konstantin barked a laugh. The racket from Konstantin had forced Flavius and Mavis to wake. I am flattered you dream about me, Eric. Get your armor on, and we only have an hour to make sure you don't cut yourself with your new swords. Konstantin was being Konstantin, and I did not detect suspicion in his voice. He was gone, stamping down the stone steps. I groaned but started moving. I followed Konstantin down to the training yard, carrying my pack and 2 blades so I would be ready to leave when the company marched. It was still dark when we arrived. The training yard was adjacent to the Citadel barracks, where the rest of the company was quartered. No one was up yet, and it was maybe an hour before sunrise. I decided to tease Konstantin that I knew some of his secrets. So, you have a spell form that allows you not to need much sleep? Konstantin eyed me with an appraising stare. I do. I need about half what a normal man does. Just means I was required to stand watch more often or not, while I was with the hounds. Konstantin had his own pack, and was getting ready for some practice. He took on a paternal tone as he gave me advice. You will just find the more spell forms you have, the more that is expected of you. But you know that already with your dimensional spell form. I nodded as I was testing both blades, deciding what to use first. Are we wrapping our blades? I asked, since Konstantin had made no effort to. We usually used practice swords or wrapped our actual blades when we practiced. You can heal yourself, Eric. There is no need to wrap mine, Konstantin said dismissively with his back to me. I could imagine the grin on his face. I had been hoping for him to say something like that. Yeah, I can, but I do not have a lot of either, so I can only heal a little. I hoped this would prevent him from causing me a serious injury as I wrapped my blade in the tacky cloth. Konstantin still didn't wrap his blade and asked, Is that how you kept up on the run to the capital? You healed your feet as we went, I nodded, and he half smiled, shaking his head in an un-Konstantin-like manner. Damn, Eric! My feet felt like an ogre had chewed on them during that run. Seeing you not suffering made me think I was getting soft, so I made you feel inadequate. I smirked, and he lost his good humor instantly. Konstantin walked over to me, all business, and held out his hand. Do you mind if I look at them? I had to remember trying to befriend the coarse man to find out why Castile was deemed important by the Praetorian Guard. I handed him both the blades. The polished one is orc-forged, and the black one is just old. He first held the partially wrapped black blade. It is sometimes called a devoted blade, Eric, forged by the smiths of the First Legion before the elves killed them all. That is why there are no runic smiths in the Empire. They are always killed as soon as they are recognized. There might be some working in secret for the Emperor, but they are not known publicly, Konstantin stated. The elves killed the runic smiths, I asked. Interested in the small piece of history? The Barteradian assassins, yes. Not always elves, though. He moved his hand along the length of the black blade. It was mostly black with a large number of tiny pits in it. As I was saying, the devoted blades were forged to kill one specific enemy. When carving out the Empire, the First Legion fought campaigns against the orcs, dwarves, elves, goblins, gnolls, centaurs, and other humans. Most likely, this blade was forged against one of those. He handed me back the blade. It is rare and valuable then. So, what does it do? Can it kill them with one swing? I swung the blade to test its weight. I have only read the histories, and this is my first time seeing one. The Black Blade companies were elite units in the various campaigns sent after the most troubling opponents. The stories say the Black Blades prevented beings from using magical healing, including potions, after being injured. Konstantin informed me while facing me. The blades are uncommon, but not rare, and probably hanging on the walls of most citadels in the Empire. Dungeon blades are much more valuable and useful against all types of creatures. So, will the blade not work against the specters? I asked, reconsidering choosing this blade. It will. It is a runic weapon. The black coloring is from silver mixed with steel. There is an ancient tale about the black blades. It may regain some of its luster if you soak it in the blood of the enemy it was forged to fight. If you find another wielder of such a blade, you should ask them. He was ready to begin, and we engaged and started our practice. The clang of steel woke the men up, and a few came outside to watch from a distance and prepare for the march, repacking their packs. I realized they were not going to be happy with Konstantin or me for waking them early. Neither of us was using shields, and the first serious injury was to my forearm. After parrying my blade, Konstantin cut all the way to the bone on a slash where the greaves didn't cover. I cradled my arm to conceal the healing as best I could from watchful eyes. Reknitting the muscle and flesh took time, and Konstantin watched, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't think he believed I could heal until he saw it himself. Konstantin nodded to himself now that it was confirmed. Okay, Eric? Ari, so your biggest problem is getting used to the longer sword. You have the strength and size to wield it, but your mind and muscle memory are still trying to use it like a shorter blade. Now, we spent the next half an hour as Konstantin showed me how the sword forms I learned in training were slightly different for the longer blade. Almost the entire company was outside watching now, including Brutus. I had tried the orcish blade, and the black blade just felt better in my hands. I was only loaning the other blade to Brutus anyway. Adrian appeared with Delmar first and yelled, "Breakfast inside, then we march!" As the cold air dried our sweat, I walked inside with Konstantin. He asked, "Did you see him?" "See who?" I asked, confused. "The first citizen Boris. He was watching you from the third-floor balcony. I am disappointed if you didn't see him," he said, shaking his head. "I noticed people watching from the windows of the citadel, but I did not know who they were. I was too busy trying to avoid your blade seeking my flesh," I muttered. Konstantin clapped me on the back in an almost fatherly pat. "Tai taught you better than that. Danger can come from anywhere. My impression is the first citizen Boris is about as smart as an ornery bull, but if you ignore that bull, its horn is going to pierce your heart when you least expect it." Konstantin went to sit with Adrian and Delmar, leaving me to take a table with Brutus and Matteo. I preempted Brutus' question. Brutus, I will loan you the Orcish-made blade. The black blade feels better in my hands." Matteo sounded in. "You were lucky that Konstantin was not part of the contest. He brutalized you this morning and could have won the blade. Brutus defended me. He gave Konstantin as good as he got. Eric was probably pulling his strikes so as not to hurt the old man. Besides, he has his own runic weapon already." Matteo was bouncing and itching to change the topic. "Don't even ask Matteo." My answer is still no. Matteo looked distressed, but didn't ask to borrow the Dreamscape amulet again. Felix came, put a massive haunch of ham on the table, and sat with us. Blaze brought a bowl of small boiled potatoes. To everyone's disappointment, the pitchers were full of only water. I noted with some snark, since the Countess arrived, the food and drink quality has really dropped off. Everyone was using knives to cut off chunks of the boiled ham. Blaze commented, "That is because you spend your nights in the Alchemist Tower. We usually get the leftovers from the Duchess's dinner with her mother. Seconds, but extremely tasty, and at least it is seasoned." He tapped the bland ham with his knife. As we ate, the conversation drifted to the company contest yesterday. I only half followed the conversation and nodded when appropriate. It was all too soon when Castile arrived with Scholar Flavian, and Delmar ordered us to formation. Everyone made to stuff as much food as they could into their mouths as we went to shoulder our packs and began the march. Adrian informed me, "You will be marching next to Castile in the center, Eric." I nodded, as it seemed I would be talking with Castile during the march. Castile was dressed in comfortable clothing, and even had a small pack herself, which I found surprising. She usually did not carry any gear, but then I remembered we had a kettle of souls. I assumed that was what she was transporting. Flavius was on her right, and I was positioned on her left. After we settled into the march, Castile said, "You are going to protect Scholar Flavius." Castile smirked. "Don't look surprised. You carry a runic weapon and proved yourself one of the best swordsmen in the company. Your aptitude to shield Xina with your spell form was also a consideration. So, no more scouting with Konstantin?" I said, confused. "We had agreed I was going to get closer to him and learn his purpose in the company." "No, not with you carrying the potions again. Flavius is back as well to help him," Castile noted the scout further down the road. It was late morning when we reached the turn-off for the trade road that led to the ruins of Kelran. We took a short break at the intersection before starting the march north. The dirt road was lined with farms, but all too soon, we reached the old paved trade road. Everyone got tense with the stone road beneath us. We had fought the Wraith and were headed into dire wolf territory. Castile and Flavius talked about their plans for exploring the haunted city, and I listened as we walked. The first step was circling it and seeing if the maps Flavius had in the books matched. There were only 2 gates through the walls, the east and west gate. Flavius thought the west gate was the better access point as it was near the Elven library. That was where many of the books in the Duchess's collection had been salvaged from. Flavius only found a short accounting of the expedition that recovered the books. The members of the expedition camped a mile outside the west gate, and then, on the first day with clear skies and sun, they rushed to the library and recovered as many books as they could. The specters had trouble in daylight and they encountered only a handful inside the library. Still, 6 members of the 20-man expedition had died. Listening to Flavius describe the journal entries of the mage who led the expedition, I was not feeling too great about our chances, but glad I now had a runic blade to fend them off. I also had the elven dagger as a backup weapon and thought about loaning it to the scholar since he already knew about it. If the situation made sense, I decided to give it to him. The 2 finally discussed the possible locations for the mysterious shimmering labyrinth dungeon. Flavius gave his view. "I strongly believe it is under the largest hearth tree on the west side of the city. I have found numerous references to the mages accessing the ley lines in the city in the same area, but no definitive location to the dungeon." "Are you sure it is even in the city?" Castile questioned, doubt in her tone. Flavius wavered. "We have been over this before, Mage Castile. The selection of books they took on the expedition is highly varied. There are 19 references to the dungeon, but it does not appear on any of the maps. The Elven King and his family controlled access and kept its location secret." The conversation went back and forth as Flavius described the city layout. The city's east side was residential, and the only area where non-elves were permitted. The west side had their important citizens, royalty, wealthy, and many of their craftsmen. That is what the city was known for: high-quality trade goods. The celebrated craftsmen and the works of art they produced. Konstantin came back from scouting to Castile, and Adrian and Delmar joined him. Konstantin noted, "We are still south of the dire wolf territory. I suggest we make camp soon." There was a brief discussion, and 4 miles later, Flavius found a defensible hill with good water nearby, and we set up camp. Mavis had Flavius's gear and set up his tent. Since I was in charge of his protection, I set my tent next to him. Mavis set his own tarp next to mine. I was dreading Konstantin asking me to train with the Black Blade. Instead, Castile approached Mavis and me, saying, "Mavis, make sure you watch him while he sleeps. I do not believe he can perceive the outside world while using the amulet." Castile made eye contact with me and nodded slightly before leaving. Castile was telling me that she expected me to use the amulet. Mavis nodded seriously. "I will guard your body with my life, Eric. Maybe I would not have to stand watch either." "What about the watch?" I inquired to confirm with the departing Castile. "You are tied to Flavius. Do not leave his side," Castile said, talking over her shoulder as she walked away. "Konstantin overhead, don't worry, Eric. I am sure Fabian will not mind watching you train. Fabian, who was already inside his tent, replied, I do not mind watching your sword practice, Eric. I heard of your exploits with the blade. Great, I said sarcastically. After Castile left, I told Mavith quietly, if you remove the amulet from my body, I will wake. I thought there were some secrets I would prefer to keep. A few hours later, I was in my tent after a supposedly short session with Konstantin before dinner. Dinner was cold, and only a little was left when we approached Lurkin for our portion. He gave me an apologetic look as he scrapped the pot from my bowl. Before using the amulet, I used a glowstone for light to page through all of Fabian's books. I wanted to add them to my Dreamscape amulet tonight. With the amulet in hand, I channeled Aether into it. The Dreamscape looked as I left E.T. was half expecting to find strangers inside for some reason. Oscar greeted me with his bobbed tail wagging emphatically. I petted the excitable Australian shepherd. I continued the dog therapy by talking to him. Guess the secret is out in the open, Oscar. Oscar barked and chased to get a tennis ball I had created for him. I laughed, guess it doesn't matter to you. I tossed the ball for him while I made copies of the elven books Scholar Fabian had me carry for him. I couldn't read them, but there were some maps inside. Maybe the knowledge would have a use in the future, so I would not mind the mental backlash when I exited the Dreamscape. With that task done, I walked into the first monster room, the Ankeg chamber. My sparring partners were playing cards. Konstantin arched his eyebrow at me. Going to get some practice today. Or are you going to sit and laze about all night? He put down his cards, waiting for my response. I sighed. Yes, I manifested my new blade. The group around the table eyed the black blade curiously. They were waiting for me to choose someone to practice with. The table consisted of Mavith, Konstantin, Adrian, Blaze, and Xavier. I nodded reluctantly to Konstantin as I had practiced with him this morning, and this evening as I adapted to the new weapon. With Konstantin's help, it was now comfortable in my hands. I was also confident I could beat the man in combat using my air shields. What I wanted to be able to do was beat him without the defensive air shield spell form. We moved to the center of the chamber and began. The Konstantin Dreamscape had improved quite a bit. I realized the magic amulet had upgraded Konstantin's fighting style based on our practices today. It was learning from my new memories. It meant the Dreamscape manifestations were imperfect, but could be improved upon. I spent 2 hours with Konstantin and an hour with Xavier. Xavier's manifestation was good, but I doubted it fully incorporated the Swordmaster's knowledge. I tried to combine Xavier's skills with Konstantin's. The results were surprising. Konstantin's style had been blunter and simpler, while Xavier had an efficient and artistic style moving between the sword forms. Konstantin's new blended swordsmanship suddenly became unbeatable for me. It was frustrating to fight his new efficient form. I took repeated losses and decided I had enough. I returned to the entry room and studied the spell form for slow aging. I was getting close to the tipping point, and I would finally learn spell form. After 7 total hours had passed, I stepped out of the dungeon and left the Dreamscape amulet. I opened my eyes to darkness and strained my hearing to understand my surroundings. Men snored in their tents, and the men on watch whispered nearby. The night guards were arguing over who had the better attendant at the Citadel. I could tell by the argument's voices that it was Felix and Benito. If I remember correctly, Felix had a short, fat, middle-aged woman, and Benito, an older woman who constantly wore a scowl. I felt well rested and sat up. My head spun with vertigo, and I laid back down. The mental strain from adding to the Dreamscape soon passed. Adding 8 books had been a little much in one session, or maybe it had been upgrading Konstantin in conjunction. When I felt comfortable, I exited the tent and nodded to Mavith, who was whittling new checker pieces. Surveying the camp, there were 2 small fires. One had Konstantin stoking a fire, and the other had Lurkin preparing hot food for the company's breakfast. I could see my breath. It was one of the coldest mornings I had experienced. I went and sat across from Konstantin, who was focused on heating water in a small cup. The heat of the fire felt amazing on my legs. How many days to Kelran? I asked. 2. He sipped his tea contentedly. We will be in the dire wolf territory after mid-morning. I'm unsure if Castile will have us increase the pace or use caution. Positives and negatives to both courses of action. Before he could expound on the positives and negatives, I asked him a question. Have you fought dire wolves before? I stirred the coals on my side to release more heat. I have. Smart creatures. They will distract a group and then pick off the weakest member, dragging them away. Hopefully, our numbers will deter them from attacking, Konstantin said while cleaning his cup of tea leaves. He then took out his weapons to clean, starting with his runic weapon. The silvery blade looked ethereal in the firelight. I took out my black blade to sharpen and clean as well. You don't sharpen a runic weapon, Eric. Did you notice it has no chips on the edge? That durability is why runic blades are cherished. To clean it, just use a rag to clean the length. Then use the oil rag on it. It will make sure it draws smoothly. I worked in silence across from Konstantin. The oil rag he referred to was used for our metal helms to protect them from rusting. Konstantin cycled through his weapons, and I did likewise. I was still carrying my short sword, a knife on my belt, and the Legion utility hatchet in my pack. Seeing us finishing, Lurkin called us over for an early breakfast. Konstantin and I enjoyed the dense bread that tasted like garlic, topped with the berry preserves Lurkin had heated. Maveth joined us, bleary-eyed after a short nap. He had watched over me while I slept all night, which is not what I had intended. I had just wanted him to rouse me if something threatened me. Maveth's deep voice soon awakened the whole camp a little earlier than sunrise. Delmar called everyone to eat and announced we would start in early March. Maveth received some annoyed stares. Back on the old paved road, we walked till just past midday before a rest. I ended up working in my Elvish language with Scholar Flavius as a distraction from the boredom of marching. My Elven vocabulary was growing, but the scholar was not impressed with some of my pronunciations. We set a fast pace, and Flavius and Konstantin were scouting only a short distance ahead. As we marched in the afternoon, the scouts started to find dire wolf tracks crossing the road. They were massive, larger than a man's hand. We encountered our first dire wolf later in the day. A signal from the rear guard had everyone turn, and our 8 men with shields quickly formed a wall. It looked like just a normal gray wolf at maybe 200 yards back. Then, another darker gray wolf walked into the road to stand over the pup. Maveth advised the company, "They are not hunting us." If they were then, they would not have shown themselves. His statement didn't make anyone less tense. I was shocked as the larger wolf was just as big as Ginger. Benito noticed the same thing. "That beast is as big as a horse. I wonder if I can ride it." Firth barked a harsh laugh at Benito. "Why don't you go and give it a try and let us know how it goes?" Some laughs and snickers from the company eased the tension a little. Blaze, behind me, asked, "I can hit it. Should I release?" There were some whispers between Castile and Delmar before Delmar announced, "Hold your arrows. Firth and Mateo, you are added to the rear guard." We tightened the formation, and Konstantin and Flavius were now only leading the company by 20 strides so they could retreat back to us quickly. Adrian was constantly reminding individuals of their jobs if a dire wolf pack did attack. Half the men were for defense, and the other half were charged with killing whichever monstrous wolf Castile restrained with her shadow chains first. It was important to eliminate one foe at a time as quickly as possible when attacked with numbers. Scholar Flavius was probably the most nervous among us after we spotted the dire wolf. I tried to take his mind off our danger, Flavius. "Have you learned anything about the shimmering labyrinth dungeon? What monsters are inside?" The king controlled the dungeon, and it gave vast resources to the city. Iron ore and silver were mined from inside it as the craftsmen in the city used it in great quantities. "There are also a few references to rarer metalsmithril for one," he said giddily. "It also supplied vast quantities of meat to the city," he paused to think. "References to dishes prepared with boiled spider legs, bear meat, and mushrooms from the dungeon have appeared in my reading." While I was thinking about what horrors supplied those things, Lurkin, our company cook, asked, "How do you prepare spider legs?" Scholar Flavius had a big smile. "I wondered that myself. Apparently you need to boil the legs and crack them open for the meat. Not all varieties are edible, but I read it tastes just like crab meat, only saltier. The elves seem to like the meat dipped in butter made from goat's milk." Delmar at the front of the formation replied, "Spider meat is a bit mushy, but not bad. On long delves you eat what the dungeon provides. It is not uncommon for larger dungeons to support entire communities." Delmar was our experienced dungeon delver. He addressed the scholar. "What else did you find about the dungeon?" "Nothing. Just the name appears in some texts I pieced together. It was called the Shimmering Labyrinth. I think it is extremely large based on the references, but the king kept it hidden from the outside world as a treasure of his city and people." Scholar Flavius replied with uncertainty. Firth announced from the back, "The large wolf is following us. It is in the woods, maybe 200 yards back." Maviath offered his input again. "If it were hunting us, then it would have called the rest of the pack. It is probably making sure we are leaving its territory. Maybe it is teaching the young one how to stalk its prey," Brutus noted. "If we are the prey, then your words are not reassuring, Maviath." There was some back and forth among the men when Castile ordered, "Halt, Konstantin!" She called the scout back from further down the road. When he returned, she ordered, "Go and check on the wagons we found on our way here." Konstantin rushed into the woods, and I realized we were approaching the area where we had discovered the wagons. I remember picking up a gold ring from the ground at the time. The money from the locked chest had gotten the company replacement armor. Konstantin whistled for Maviath, and the Goliath went to support him. It was not far from the road, and we could see them as the leaves had all fallen from the trees. I checked on our furry follower, and it sat on its hind legs about 200 yards back. I could tell Blaze was itching to take a shot, but Castile held him back. When Konstantin and Maviath returned, "Just small animals have been by since." Castile nodded, but she had apparently expected something else by her consternation. The short rest was over, and we continued our march. There was a discussion on when we would stop for the night, as we had covered almost 40 miles today on the road. Castile told everyone to take out glowstones, and we marched into the night. "Castile, being next to me," I asked, "are we continuing because of the dire wolf?" Castile considered her answer. "A dire wolf following us is not unusual. What I am confused about was the first smaller wolf we spotted. We have not seen it since. I even searched for it and other dire wolves. The large one behind us is the only one. Fortunately, the blue moon was bright overhead, and the skies were clear. We marched for 3 hours in the darkness, before Castile finally ordered us to camp in the middle of the road. Konstantin objected until Castile told him she hoped the dire wolf would approach during the night, so she could snare it with her shadow chains, and we could eliminate it. Eliminating our stalker would be welcome and boost morale. We set up a tight camp for the night, and the watch was doubled. Castile reminded Maviath to watch over me again. It was her way of telling me to use the amulet tonight. I did not know how I felt about using the amulet with danger so close. I reminded Maviath, "All you need to do is remove the amulet to awaken me, but get some sleep tonight yourself. I understood you the first 5 times you said it, Eric." The Goliath seemed frustrated that I either didn't trust him, thought his memory was terrible, or was tense like the others, with the dire wolf following us. My tent was in the company's center, next to Scholar Flavius. When I crawled inside, I debated not using the amulet again. It felt like there was a building tension in the air to me. I think Castile felt it too. I decided to spend a few hours inside and focus on the spell form for slow aging. With Oscar in my lap, I spent 2 hours studying and then exiting the dreamscape. I listened, and men were whispering, but there was no alarm. I could hear Maviath breathing heavily as he sat on a log and rolled over near our tents. I entered the dreamscape again. About 3 hours in, the familiar feeling of the spell form inscribing on my core was achieved. I had learned the slow aging spell form. I exited the dreamscape, excited to study it and learn how it worked. Nothing had changed in the camp, but Castile was agitated as the dire wolf was apparently still watching us but had not approached. I studied the spell form and activated it. It was supposed to draw a slow trickle of aether to slow my aging greatly. The trickle was so insignificant I didn't even perceive it. I used some aether to cast some air shields and frowned. I had wanted to see how fast my aether recovered with the slow aging active. My best guess was that my aether was recovering at half of normal. At least, that was the best I could estimate. It was still a decent trade-off for being able to live for thousands of years. I smiled as I lay awake for the rest of the night, listening to everyone and thinking about what I could do with all the time in the world. The sunrise came, and the dire wolf had never approached the camp. It had also remained vigilant, unnervingly watching us the entire night. After arriving in the Telian wilderness, Traeliorn left his apprentice Veril and ranger Rielia and flew north on the back of Kilma. The ice drake was a good mount and friend. She moved with his body and did most of the work as they flew north, so he didn't even require a saddle. His plan was simple. He would summon the largest wyvern he could and attack small towns south of the Telian capital. The wyvern would kill the peasants, making the emperor look incompetent and unable to protect his citizens. His goal was actually to get the emperor to leave his palace. Then Traeliorn would attack him, putting his life on the line to end the Void Mage. The emperor had caused him so much pain and grief over the last 2 centuries that he was willing to risk his life to finally kill him. Traeliorn landed between 2 rocky summits and sent Kilma to one of the peaks to watch over him as he worked. Summoning a wyvern was always a difficult task. Luring one through an open portal took a lot of ether and a powerful summoner. The draconic beasts also had very primal desires: hunt, kill, eat, and reproduce, and the negotiation with the beast would usually have to satisfy those needs. He spent an entire day laying out the largest formation he had ever constructed. He laughed, thinking it was big enough to summon an actual dragon. He was not stupid enough to try that, though. A dragon's will was too strong, and would not even enter negotiations. Traeliorn preferred to bypass the negotiation phase of a summoning, and instead dominate the mind of the creature when it came through the portal. He spent an entire day resting in preparation, and Kilma brought him a large fresh fish to eat. "I suppose you want me to cook it for the both of us." The ice drake puffed a frozen cloud at him. "Fine, it is a good 20 pounds. I'm taking the best fillet for myself." The drake puffed another cloud before curling into a ball and watching him work closely. The summoner skillfully descaled and sliced the fish. He found a large, flat rock and held out his hand as he wove the spell forms together. A flame erupted from his palm as he blasted the stone until it turned an angry red. The heat was welcome as the weather was turning. It was not turning fast enough for him. He wanted to see the fruits of his labors. He had targeted fields and farms across the eastern Telian Empire. This winter, the peasants of the Telian Empire would starve and blame the emperor. The stone cooled enough to cook the large fillets. He reached deep into his belt pouch and pulled some salt and herbs to season the fillets with. When he flipped them after a few minutes, Kilma got up and eagerly approached. "Old girl, you should be eating this raw. I have spoiled you too much with cooked food." The ice drake gave an indignant puff. "Consider this your reward for flying my old bones around." Traeliorn took a small piece of the fish after it was perfectly cooked, and the ice drake quickly consumed what was left behind. Kilma then launched herself into the air to keep watch from one of the peaks again. The summoner shook his head and considered sending the drake away if the emperor left his palace to confront him. It was something that was unlikely to happen, though. He began the ritual summoning with the watery blue moon, giving him strong light. The wyvern scale at the center was the focus, as he poured ether into the runes he had carefully inscribed on the ground to focus his power. The magic would search for a match to that scale, on all of Dizia, and sometimes beyond. He liked to think of it like fishing, casting out a line and hook, seeking out the fish on its own. It was almost an hour before he finally got a bite. He had devoted 2/3 of his ether so far, and was slightly worried when the portal finally anchored and opened, showing a wyvern on the other side. Even before the beast stepped through, he knew it was formidable. It came fearlessly through and immediately lunged at the mage. The dragonkin's size and the attack's ferocity made him flinch. It was practically the size of an actual dragon. The containment runes flared blue, green, and red as they held the massive wyvern in place. It strained and roared defiance inside the circle. Traeliorn tried to establish a connection to its mind, but the creature was stronger than a wyvern should be. It was like wrestling an oiled pig from his youth. He kept grabbing at Etonly to have it slip away. Traeliorn was sweating as his aether was slowly consumed in the fight for dominance. Finally, the wyvern made a mistake, and Traeliorn slipped into his mind and subdued his thoughts. The elf summoner sat heavily on the ground, his heart still racing from the struggle. He had almost lost the struggle. He only had about 1/20th of his ether remaining. Kilma landed next to him, now that the difficult part was done. He noted that she used him as a buffer to the wyvern. He scratched her ear holes to let her know he was fine. He drank his entire water skin before slipping back into the mind of the impressive wyvern. Controlling a beast through its mind was not easy. He would give it back some control to make it easier on himself, and allow himself time to recover some equilibrium. The wyvern launched into the air, and Traeliorn began the search for the largest farming communities north of him. He found a farmer in a field, harvesting squash. A horse pulled a cart, while the farmer and his children deposited squash into the cart for winter. He set the wyvern loose on the people and lessened his connection to the beast. The summoner collapsed on the ground, checking in on the wyvern periodically as it terrorized and killed peasants. Even after it had satiated its hunger, the summoner nudged it to continue its rampage of the people. It had been a few hours since the summoning when he received a message sending from his apprentice Veril. "Master Kelran, the legionaries have found us. They have a drake and more than one mage with them. We are running, but I do not think we will last long. Please send help." Traeliorn's heart pounded. He was going to lose another apprentice and friend, not to mention the ranger's death would anger the general as well. He reconnected with the wyvern that was massacring a pasture of sheep. The creature tried to resist Traeliorn's mind, but the link had already been anchored. He forced the creature into the air and sent it south to find his apprentice. Such complete control drained his aether rapidly as he searched through the eyes of the beast. He headed for any large flying creature in the skies. He was searching for the drake. Veril had an anchor stone for a portal, making it somewhat easier to determine the direction, but it was more of a feeling than a true direction. He knew he was not going to make it in time. It was just too far. But at least he could get his revenge. There, not the drake but the anchor stone. The massive wyvern landed in an open grassy area dotted with trees. Underneath one of the trees he found Veril alive. When the wyvern did not attack, relief filled the young elf's face. "Master Kelran, is that you?" Traeliorn used weak telepathy to communicate through his bond with the wyvern. "It is me. Where are the ranger and legionaries?" A pained look came on Veril's face. "She gave me more time to run. They caught her. The legionaries killed the 2 hill giants I summoned and are coming after me. They have a powerful fire mage with them, Master Kelran." Their conversation was interrupted when a drake zipped over the trees. A man was riding it. The wyvern launched itself into the sky in pursuit. The summoner guided its rage at the much smaller creature. The aerial pursuit quickly got frustrating. The wyvern had filled its belly, not helping its agility. The rider and drake were too agile and fast, and the rider kept trying to anchor his own dominance on the mind of the wyvern. It was becoming futile, and Traeliorn's aether was almost empty. He needed to take a risk. He pushed his mind to a corner of the wyvern and left the rest for the mage to subvert. He was a powerful human mage who soon grappled the remaining mind into submission, but didn't realize Traeliorn was still present. The Empire mage landed his drake, thinking himself victorious, and approached the wyvern wearing a sneering grin. Conquering this beast was an impressive feat. Traeliorn had almost failed himself. If Traeliorn had not already weakened its defenses, the human mage would not have had a chance. But here they were. He waited as the human approached to claim his prize. The human even foolishly left his drake behind. When he was in striking distance, Traeliorn pushed his mind out to regain control. The mage realized his mistake too late, and the wyvern's long neck snapped out and consumed him in one bite. Some defensive magic flared inside the wyvern's mouth, but the angry wyvern ground the mage with its teeth, crunching bones and forcing him down his throat to an already full belly. The drake took exception to its rider being eaten and charged the wyvern. The massive wyvern easily swatted it down and tore out its throat in seconds. The wyvern roared in victory, and Traeliorn smiled far away. He had saved his apprentice and killed a powerful mind mage of the Empire. Traeliorn took control of the wyvern, planning to have it carry Veril back to him in its claw. He walked the beast toward the tree, and his blood froze. The wyvern rushed the tree and battered it over, uncovering the dead apprentice with a sword piercing down into its body. The pained look on Veril's face made the summoner go into a rage. He had been so close. He had been so distracted by fighting the drake that he had left Veril unprotected. The wyvern's head snapped up, looking for movement. There, he forced the wyvern to chase the 2 fleeing legionaries. He would get some modicum of revenge. One of the men made it into the trees, but the wyvern cut the other one off, like a cat cutting off a mouse. The legionnaire was halted in his tracks, separated from his companion. Arrows uselessly bounced off the scales of the wyvern as Traeliorn stared through its eyes. In the Tellian speech, the legionaries defied the wyvern and his fate, saying, "You prefer to play with your food. Well, bring it on." Traeliorn approached slowly and sent a message into the legionnaire's mind. "You killed Veril, my apprentice?" He looked shocked at the message, but seemed to understand the wyvern was talking to him. Surprise crossed his face. He asked, "Traeliorn?" So the young legionaries knew who he was. He must be a hound sent to find him, and he found Veril instead. The wyvern's black eyes focused on the legionnaire. Traeliorn wanted confirmation he was getting his vengeance. "Did you kill my apprentice?" he repeated. "Yes," the legionnaire answered with a clear and flat tone, not denying it. He was brave to be standing before certain death. Most men would have cowered, begged for their life, or soiled themselves. Instead, he stood defiantly, welcoming his fate. Far away, Traeliorn acknowledged his bravery and sent the final message to the human. "Then, legionnaire, know that it was I who sent you to your afterlife for your crime. Traeliorn Kelran, Veril's teacher and friend." The wyvern roared and lunged at the legionnaire with its powerful legs and neck. Traeliorn gasped as the backlash from his mental link with the wyvern was severed. He fell to the ground, and Kilma nudged his exhausted body worriedly. His ether was spent, and his head had an intense pressure. He was in disbelief. The wyvern must have been killed. How was that even possible? So instantaneously. Only one thing could have done Thathawid magic. It must be another accused void mage like the Emperor. How powerful would he have to be to slay a wyvern with just a spell form? Traeliorn needed a lot of rest to recover from the backlash and the ordeal of the day. He was not going to return to Barteradian lands until he got his revenge on the legionnaire who killed Veril. He rationalized that killing a void mage would help the Barteradian war effort. A few days later, Traeliorn was watching through a wolf's eyes as two legionnaires searched the wyvern and Veril's body. He was still too weak to attack. He had come here in hopes of returning Veril's body to the earth, but found the legionnaires here instead. He should have known they would want to harvest the wyvern. He watched and waited for them to leave. When they did, he had the wolf follow them. Kilma stayed on the lookout while Traeliorn buried Veril. He actually shed tears as he completed the task, promising the corpse he would avenge it. The wolf followed the legionnaires back to the city of Sobril. The next day it followed them along the road, and then north along the old abandoned trade road. There were over 20 of them in the company, but only 2 apparent mages in the group, and that legionnaire with void magic was among them as well, so 3 had strong magic. Traeliorn landed and dismounted Kilma a good distance away. He was still much too weak to confront them, but it would still take them days of travel to reach the capital. A dire wolf came out of the brush to challenge Kilma. Traeliorn smiled as the contest of wills with the dire wolf, even in his state, was not difficult. He sent the dire wolf to replace the common wolf and track the mage company. He figured they must be returning to the capital on the old road. He wouldn't let them get there, though. He just needed to recover more before he could summon again. As I joined the company for breakfast, I didn't feel immortal. Quite the opposite. Even with my slow-aging active, I was constantly in danger being part of the Legion. I realized I had become somewhat numb to a fear of injury and death. It was just part of my daily life now. Castile was watching the dire wolf as she ate some dried fruit and salted crackers. "Blaze, can you hit it?" she asked the marksman. Blaze looked up, excited at the prospect of finally getting his wish. He rushed to stand next to Castile and studied the dire wolf for a few moments. "No, the arrow's arc most likely would not make it through the branches. Maybe if we encountered a clearing." Castile studied the massive wolf and said, "Take the shot if you think you can get it." Blaze nodded emphatically and went through his arrows, selecting the best one for when the opportunity arose. It was a long breakfast and a slow time packing up the camp, and Delmar did not rush us as normal. My suspicion was everyone was dragging because they knew we would be close to the Kaelora and the specters this evening. Castile had me open one of the salves to give to Lurkin. He was using small swabs of the gel on the worst blistering and chafing of the company. Some men had gained weight in Sobril, and their armor did not fit perfectly anymore. It was a luxury we could afford now that we had a supply. As we started the march, The dire wolf followed us but remained in the trees far back, not giving Blaze an opportunity to take the shot. It appeared much smarter than it should be. During a rest, I heard Konstantin talking with Castile. The dire wolf will stop following us when we get within the sight of the ruins. I am surprised it has followed us this far, but they are smart creatures and know not to approach the undead city, Castile muttered with some snark. I am assuming you are suggesting we are not as intelligent as a dire wolf for going into the city? Konstantin shrugged and retorted with his own snark. I have never met a smart human before. We all eventually do something stupid more often than realize. Castile shook her head, smirking at the comment, but nodded in agreement. She looked back at the wolf, concern on her face. Do you think you and Flavius could hide and ambush it when it passed? I am certain there is only the one. Konstantin studied the dire wolf, its yellow eyes seeming to glow from the distance. With 5 of us, maybe. Eric, Mavaith, Blaze, and Flavius, he named his choices for the ambush. I let out a low grunt from nearby, but was ignored. Why was I always being volunteered? Castile ended up shaking her head. No. Perhaps it is as you say and will leave us as we approach the elven ruins. The afternoon wore on, and the road got wider as we passed over familiar stones. In one break of the trees, I could see the mammoth tree jutting out of the city ruins. Konstantin said the elves maintained gardens of special trees. Schaller Fabian also noticed the tree. That must be a hearth tree ceremonial tree where the elven dead were buried among the roots to be returned to the earth. The roots run deep, and they never stop growing. The First Legion supposedly cut all of them down within the Empire's borders. The lumber was used to construct the Emperor's palace in the capital. How? Mavith asked, awed by the tree as well. I would think it would take 100 men to circle that gigantic tree. As he stepped from behind a tree, Konstantin answered the question. Magic felled the trees, of course. Goliath. He looked up at the canopy, which was odd as it was the only tree that still had all green leaves, while every other tree in the forest was turning fall colors and losing its leaves. Konstantin had a sour look on his face, because I had not spotted him sneaking up on me. He noted, giant eagles were nesting in it the last time we passed. Adrian relayed to everyone in his command voice, giant eagles are a danger and can lift a man 100 feet in the air and drop them to their death. He made eye contact with everyone. Do not wander in the open unless you want to test your ability to fly. We broke into the clearing around the city. Looking at it now, it felt like the forest respected the city's territory, and there was no overgrowth from the road toward the city. It had been 1,500 years, yet the 400 yards to the city were utterly unobstructed up to the walls. Konstantin gave the orders, we will stay under the cover of the trees as we circle to the western gate. As we moved under them, few leaves were left on the higher branches. The company made a slow pace as we scanned the skies and the woods. I was not the only one to see the dire wolf off in the distant woods, still keeping track of us. I guess the city did not scare it off. On our right, it was easy to see the city walls were crumbling. Large sections of the ramparts had collapsed. Some ancient foundations could be seen outside the city wall. With the wooden structure they once supported long since collapsed and rotted away. The sense of death was strong, with the vegetation refusing to grow, and only the massive green tree jutting out of the city. When we reached the western gate, we found a large wooden gate the height of 2 men, and wide enough for 6 horses to ride abreast through. Delmar questioned aloud, why has the gate not rotted to dust? Scholar Fabian answered. The elves treat their wood with a preservative that can last the lifetime of an elf. Elves can live more than a millennia. Blaze, who had incredible eyesight, said, it is not in good condition. It looks to have some rot, and there appears to be a gap on the right. He pointed, but I could not see anything inside the city. Castile studied the sky. We will make camp further away and enter the city in the morning with an exploration group composed of those of you that have runic weapons, the scholar and myself. Everyone else will guard the camp. I almost laughed when Brutus realized that claiming the runic sword prize came at a weighty price. I had obviously fallen into the trap as well, although I suspected even if I didn't have a runic weapon, I would have volunteered. We moved 2 miles from the city and found a small ruined watchtower similar to the one we stayed on the river. There had once been a road that passed by this tower, but the forest had long since reclaimed it. Most of the walls had collapsed, but it would be easily defensible, and with the dire wolf still watching us, the added security was welcome. While men moved large stones in the rubble to clear space for tents and make it more defensible, Konstantin had Brutus and I practice against each other. I was finding the black blade's added length more suited my strength. Without using my air shields, Brutus and I were good training partners. Konstantin and Adrian gave us pointers as they supervised the clearing of the ruined tower's interior. I actually preferred this practice to moving the large stones with everyone else. Benito complained. I thought after a month of moving those cursed white marble markers, I would never have to move a stone again. Colm clapped him on the back. But you are so good at. I bet you could roll that stone out at the entrance. Firth quickly doubted Benito's ability. I don't know. He is the smallest man in the company. Benito leapt at the opportunity. I bet you a large copper I could. I don't know if I should feel bad for Benito for getting tricked into doing the extra work. After all, he got a copper out of it. Everyone was famished as the sun set, and a strong fire burned in the camp center. The walls around us were between 12 and 20 feet, so we felt safe. Dark clouds had moved in to cover the moon and stars, making it pitch black out in the woods. We established a shit pit going into the old basement of the tower, as no one was going out into the woods tonight. I heard Blaze tell Delmar he could see the yellow eyes of the dire wolf in the dark. I had a choice when I entered my dreamscape amulet later that night. I could start working on a new spell form or practice with my new sword. I opted for sword practice, as I didn't want to get distracted trying to learn a new spell form during our exploration. I kept my practice short to just 3 hours. When I exited the dreamscape, all was quiet, and the weather had gotten very cold. I pulled out my heavy rain cloak and wrapped myself to sit by the fire. I was not the only one. 3 men were guarding the archway into the tower, and 2 other men were at the fire. I sat with them, glad for the heat. I was not surprised. One of the men was Konstantin, and the other was Delmar. They were talking quietly and just nodded at me as I sat across from them. The crackling of the wet wood made it impossible to hear what they were talking about. Castile came and sat next to me unexpectedly. Delmar asked her, "Is something wrong?" Castile looked to the sky. "The wolf is still out there watching, and these clouds are not natural." Konstantin shook his head irately. "The summoner." Castile nodded slowly. "I think so. Some type of storm elemental is causing the clouds." Delmar cursed. "An Orge's ass. Castile, if it is Traeliorn, we should run now." Konstantin stirred the coals calmly. "It is probably too late. Depending on what he summons to attack us, we might have to take refuge in the city." Castile offered some hope. "It might just be another of his apprentices. We will see how strong the elemental is when it changes the weather." As if she had cursed us, a few snowflakes started falling, quickly becoming bigger and heavier. The fire sizzled as larger and larger flakes were consumed on the coals. No one spoke until Konstantin finally said, "Seems like a powerful elemental to me." The camp was quickly awoken, and everyone was ordered to pack. I was close enough to Castile, Adrian, and Delmar to overhear. Delmar wanted to retreat. "We should get back on the road and race back to Sobrol," he added. "If we are going to run, we could also head east. Parvas is much closer than Sobrol." The wet snow was accumulating quickly, pulling the heat from my body, and my toes were getting numb. My breath was a solid cloud every time I exhaled. I just hoped they decided soon. My gear was packed, and I was ready. Adrian thought staying was wiser. If we march in this snow, at the rate it is falling, it could be a man's height in half a day. We should fortify the tower and prepare for the summoner. Castile finally decided, "We don't know how far the storm reaches. The dire wolf knows we are in the tower. I think the storm elemental is creating the snow, so we don't move from here. Whatever beast he is planning to summon, it will know where to find us. He might be holding us here, so he has time to summon a creature. We cannot deal with a wyvern," she said emphatically. Reluctantly, she decided on a course of action. We marched for Parvus. When Castile mentioned a wyvern, I thought Castile would give me a look, but she didn't. Delmar called out, 3 days' food. Lighten your pack of non-essentials." Delmar was giving us the freedom to decide what we wanted to drop. The snow, already 3 inches deep after just 15 minutes, was soon littered with Legion gear and food. The falling snow quickly covered cooking sets, tarps, spare clothes, discarded food, and hatchets. Everyone was confused about the snow and marching before dawn. Glowstones were out, lighting our way through the deepening snow. Adrian moved among the men, letting them know what was happening so rumors would not spread. Visibility was only about 30 feet, and we marched 3 abreast and in close formation. The front of the line suddenly stopped. Everyone moved forward to circle a blue spectral form of a child. It was thrashing at the snow, frustrated. Konstantin already had his blade out and was flexing his forearm, eager to strike down the undead. He was scanning the snow further away, and you could see more figures moving. Castile had dropped her pack and removed a large bronze urn, the Kettle of Souls. Konstantin looked down at her. They must be killing the vegetation at night. We should be safe on the road. Castile stood with the urn. Destroy that spectre. Let's confirm this will work if we need it. Konstantin eagerly stepped forward. The spectre looked just like a child, just translucent. When it looked up, its face was twisted in pain as it lunged at Konstantin. His slash left a blue line on the spectre, pushing it back as his sword sparked. A second strike followed, and the apparition deformed and melted slowly into the ground. Castile moved forward, holding out the urn. Her feet crunched on the snow, and her breath created large clouds in front of her. The urn had blue sparks flash over it as she focused either into the device. Where the spectre had melded into the ground, wisps of blue-violet smoke flowed up and into the urn. It was similar to the smoke from forming an essence, but it had a deeper purple color. Castile breathed a sigh of relief as she capped the urn. Konstantin asked, "What happens now that it is inside that?" She shook the urn, but we couldn't hear anything. She explained, "It is destroyed. Either crystal dust with a necromantic affinity for alchemy." I had never used one before, and it just felt like it was draining the heat from my hands. Adrian rushed forward to attack another spectre of an older woman who was more white than blue and had blended in the snowfall. Runic weapons to the front. Do not fire any of the arrows unless you absolutely must. I drew my blade and formed the front line with a drain to my left and Brutus to my right. Castile was drawing the second dead spectre into the urn. My first opponent was the image of a guardsman. He wielded a spectral blade, and my slash passed through the blade and connected with his body. I did not get the same sparks as Konstantin's blade, but it felt like I had struck something akin to a training dummy. I stabbed with my next strike, pushing it back. My third attack was an overhead swing onto its head, and it finally started to meld into the ground. Blue wisps of violet smoke from my defeated foe flowed back toward Castile. 9 spectres were killed before they stopped coming. Adrian was breathing heavily and accounting for all 23 men and Castile. Delmar barked, "It is getting heavier. Castile!" He was right, as the flakes were larger and the line of sight decreased. Konstantin advised, "We will never make it if the snowfall is this heavy all the way to Parvus." Everyone's helm had an inch of snow on it. The snow also melted on our necks from our body heat, soaking our clothes under the armor. Hypothermia was going to be a real problem soon. Castile's hands were blue from the cold as she held the bronze urn. I produced leather gloves from my dimensional space and handed them to her. She took them absent-mindedly. She was considering entering the city, and we all knew it. Finally, the words came out with vitriol. "Cursed summoner, we make for the city's gate."